I'm calling to order the meeting for the Town of Pittsboro, Monday, June 12th, 2017. And as we'll be beginning in a moment. Jay Farrell, would you lead us in pledge?
Would everyone rise to the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda?
I just noted that there were a couple of corrections to the minutes at our desk. Working on also to add those corrected minutes.
And those are from which meetings?
From our last meeting.
Next, we have our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? There are 7 items, I believe.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Pamela Baldwin. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion to go into public hearing for the purposes of conducting a public hearing on the annual budget for 2017-18?
So moved.
Moved by Pamela Baldwin, seconded by Michael Fiocco. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. There are no individuals signed up on the sign-up sheet for the public hearing on the budget. Are there any members of the audience who intend to sign up but failed to do so? Hearing none, I will go to the next agenda item, which is citizen matters, public expression speaker, county manager, is the only one signed up tonight. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, as always, to come and speak to you guys. I wanted to talk to you about the Robeson Creek Watershed Council. We've gotten it going again. We met back in February and again in May. I was asked by a couple citizens and by some of the town members, town staff, to start it up again. The Robeson Creek Watershed Council was started back in 2000, I believe. It was started by myself and by Karen Hall from North Carolina State University. At the time, I worked for the Haw River Assembly. And we were very active for about 14 years, and then partly due to some lack of funding and stuff, we have not been meeting more than once a year for the last couple of years. So I wanted partly to tell you that we've gotten started again. In case any of you are interested in keeping up with what's going on with the council, we will have, we're having quarterly meetings. Our next meeting is going to be August 24th, and I've started an email list. I know a couple of you are on that email list. I know Michael Fiocco, and I think John, I think that is. If anyone else would like to be added to it, I'd be happy to add you to that list. Also, we're sending out regular notes from the meeting, so even if you cannot attend, there's notes that you can keep up with what's going on. At our last meeting, which was in May, we had quite a full agenda, but one of the things that was on the agenda that I wanted to bring up with you guys today is we talked about the Town Circle project, which is happening right there on the Town Circle next to the courthouse. And this has been an ongoing project. I think it's been in planning process for a couple of years. It's the town of Pittsboro North Carolina State University has 319 funding to install some stormwater controls, stormwater management controls. That's what they're called right now, right? Instead of
Stormwater control measures.
stormwater control measures rather than stormwater BMPs. But anyway, we reviewed the plans at the last Robeson Creek Watershed Council meeting and are very much looking forward to that installation. So I wanted to let you know that we very much supported and thought that the plans were very good. I'm working with Sarah Wojciechowski, is that how you say her name? Wojciechowski? Anyways, from North Carolina State University, she's the engineer on it. I've been working with her in Siler City. She is amazing. You guys are very lucky to have her working on this project. She does really good work. So, anyway, when that comes up for review, I hope it gets a positive action. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, you actually have to go into public hearing on the budget. And you all never voted to do that.
We had a motion to go in.
And then go out. Everybody wants to speak.
But we should go out.
When it's not out.
Made a motion to go out. Second. Seconded by that. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Thank you. Those opposed? So we are out, and we've heard from our citizens. The next item on the agenda is commissioner updates and mayor updates. I have the pleasure of being at Catherine's meeting in May with the Robeson Creek Watershed Council on the 25th of May. On June 1st, I was at the Clean Tech workshop in Raleigh and left almost immediately after making some welcoming remarks to go to the Triangle J Council of Governments meeting on water issues that was called by Pam Heminger, the mayor of Chapel Hill. On the 8th of June, I went to a Council on Aging volunteer dinner. On the 9th, cut the ribbon at a new yoga studio here in town. And on the 13th, upcoming, I'll have a conference call. I have joined the Climate Mayors organization, which now is numbered at over 300, I believe, mayors from all across the country dedicated to the idea of working through the Paris Accord, even though the federal administration has not done so. So I'll have a conference call. I don't know if all 300 of us will be on the conference call, but I'm fascinated to see how it is that we'll be a working group for climate change issues. And then on that same day, I'll be working with a group who is dedicated to minority business women here in town. And that's a new group that's getting going, and I'm looking forward to working with that. Are there any other updates from the EDC or Triangle J Council of Governments or climate change?
I'll defer to Commissioner Fiocco first. Okay.
Well, I'll just mention what Catherine has mentioned about the Rain Garden project. And the Main Street group has been working very hard with Fred and Sarah as well, and we think that we do have a pretty good product, and so we're looking forward to that installation. We'd be interested to have an update on where we stand on that. I know we're getting close to the deadline, so we're making sure we get that going. So maybe we can hear from Fred later if he's got an update on where we stand. So the Main Street program has been really gaining momentum, and after our February presentation, we've gained 20 new members and volunteers. So I'm head of the design subcommittee, and we're going to be having a meeting. I think it's going to be next Thursday, and there are key tasks when we locate the other two kiosks downtown. It's turned out to be far more challenging than one would imagine. But so we're going to head that up and get that going. The other thing I want to mention is that last time we were talking about the additional elements of affordable housing. I mentioned school government, Tyler Hoey, and I've been in contact with him. He would like to meet with us informally at CURP, India. A group of 8 or 9, I think Brian, Jeff, 2, 3 of us would be appropriate, and go meet with him in Chapel Hill. And so if everyone's amenable to that, we can figure out who wants to go. I would like to attend. And then we'll set something up. So we can do that later on this evening.
Taylor, anything from Triangle J?
Not right now, other than they will be coming to our July meeting to present on the affordable housing. And I'm not sure which one, but the second or the first.
John?
The first or the second meeting in July.
Okay. Yeah, we just have the one second.
This will be the second.
Reporting on the Chatham County Climate Change Advisory Committee. That committee has completed a substantial report on options for mitigating climate change and adapting to climate change using forestry and land use policies, and working with landowners and people who work the land. And I'll be presenting that on June 19th during the work session of the County Commissioners. I've got 5 or 10 minutes, so that's greatly abbreviated. And I'll be happy to give that presentation to this board as well.
Any other reports from committees on which we serve? If not, then we'll move to the first item of new business is, as I alluded to earlier, I attended the Research Triangle Clean Tech Cluster Marketplace in Raleigh back in May, and very pleased to just sort of do an introductory kind of greeting from the town of Pittsboro. And 2 people have come forward wanting to present to you all. Charlie Noble is here, and so is Ryan Miller. I've met Charlie. Is Ryan here? Okay, great. All right. Charlie, would you like to start off and introduce yourself to the board as well as your presentation, which we have a copy of here at our desk?
Thank you, and thank you for welcoming me in very early. So, I'm here to talk just a bit about some clean tech technologies that we have local to our area, companies that are local to our area. One of ours in Raleigh. I'm Charlie Nobles. I'm the marketing director for a company called Census, and we are headquartered in Raleigh. And we are a smart grid company, primarily smart lighting, electric, gas, and water, and other services. We're probably not well known. We sell to cities. We sell to utilities. Probably the closest example of one of our solutions is the town of Cary. Their smart water solution is our solution. I think they have 65,000 smart water meters, and it's our meters, our RF communications, and the server that provides that two-way communication to and from the devices. And they've used it to great advantage. I'm sure many of you know a bit about what they've done and how excited they are to have that solution. So that's one small example. Another local is the town of Wake Forest. Mayor Jones, there I spoke to her recently. They are served by Wake EMC, and we have provided them a smart electric metering system that serves all their territory up in that part of Wake County. And they get two-way readings from the electric meter on the side of the house. So those are 2 smaller local examples of what we do. So I thought I'd have just a few slides to explain a bit about why I'm here tonight and what I'd like to talk to the city of Pittsboro about. Okay, good. Thank you. So we're actually not well known unless you're in the smart grid space, but we're pretty large. Census alone does about $1 billion a year in sales worldwide. And so I mentioned 2 small accounts that we serve. We also serve all of Georgia Power, 2.3 million electric meters in the state of Georgia, all of Alabama Power, all of PECO up in Pittsburgh. So we're local, but we're global, but we have solutions that would fit well, we think, with the city of Pittsburgh. So, next slide, please. Thank you. So, I'm not going to belabor this slide, but the one thing that's unique about our offering that you should know, as it relates to Pittsburgh and Chatham Park, the development, the planned development, is that we have licensed spectrum. And licensed spectrum is the same spectrum we enjoy when we use our cell phones, and we use Verizon or AT&T. They have licensed spectrum in base stations and long range, and we enjoy the same. We're the only player in this market that actually purchased spectrum directly from the FCC. It's ours free and clear to use. No one else is in that band. It gives us many advantages. One of the biggest advantages is that it gives us the ability to go long range from a base station several miles out to a water meter, a gas meter, an electric meter, a lighting control solution. And that kind of solution covers co-ops very well, like Wake EMC, rural areas very well. We're very large in that space. And then we think that type of network would cover Chatham County very well, and Chatham Park, the planned development, very well. I mentioned this to the developers here a year or two ago. We're part of the Clean Tech cluster that the mayor was referring to. So this is actually a board member on the cluster. So all the devices you see here, and the one in particular I'm responsible for is outdoor lighting control. Whether it be legacy lights or LED lights, is the ability to control that light in real time. If it's an LED light, to flash it. If there's an event, a safety event, for instance, to dim it for savings. To have alarms come from the light telling you when there's something wrong with the light. And we're rolling that out in a lot of places. The most recent one is the city of Philadelphia. I was just there last week, and they put our solution in a part of the downtown area near the Liberty Bell, where they have a lot of tourists that come in, and they control the lights actively based upon pedestrian traffic and car traffic and safety events there in Philadelphia. Next slide, please. And this actually is an actual picture. If you remember last fall, we were all of us, I'm sure, were caught up in the reality show we call The Election. And it turns out Philadelphia hosted the Democratic National Convention. And we had a pilot there with the city of Philadelphia during that convention. And they put our control solution around 80 lights in this tourist area. At the same time, we were also doing a pilot in Cleveland, not to be partisan, for the Republican National Committee as well, it turns out, for that city. And they used its solution to great advantage. And they were actually able to have the lights be lit as a function of the traffic, and also to use that for signaling if there was an event in downtown. Next slide, please. So I won't say a lot about this. This gets a little bit geeky, and I apologize. I'm an engineer by training, so you have to have some type of technical stuff on there to justify your paycheck. But the solutions we have are very simple. They simply replace the photocell. If you've looked up at a light, maybe you never have. Maybe that's the problem I have. I look up at the lights too much. But you'll notice it's usually a little a device looks like about the size of a can of soup that's on top of a fixture. It's nothing more than a photocell. It simply measures the light output, and when it gets dark, it makes the light come on, and in the morning the reverse is true. We replace that photocell and plug our module into that same socket, and it can fully control the light. It has a GPS on board. It can record the location of the light, map it on a map, very easy to use application, and also measures the actual consumption of the light so accurately, as accurately as the electric meter on the side of your house, that Georgia Power plans to meter and charge retail customers for actual consumption of their outdoor lighting. So it's encrypted, it's secure, and it works well with our network solution. Next slide, please. So why is this important for cities, large and small? Why is this important in being looked at for Philadelphia? Why is this important for me to bring up here tonight? As we look at the growth of this planned growth, we know that there is a move towards LED fixtures. We all are aware of that. The price of LED fixtures has come down. Everyone knows that's a device that can be controlled. And when you add controls to that device, replacing the photocell with our controls, you get even more functionality out of that device. And what we found, and the literature bears this out, is that you can get about $25 per year just in direct savings on maintenance and savings on energy consumption. And with an average cost per year to use that network that we deploy of around $5 per year, the difference is around $20 to the good. And with the price of the modules themselves, the payback is 4 to 5 years very easily. Now, as a comparison, when cities look to move to LED lights, the typical payback is around 7 years to get the energy savings off the light. So imagine something you could add to that LED light to get more usefulness out of it that would actually shorten the overall payback to 4 to 5 years. In fact, we have them being installed in places where they don't even have LED lights yet. They're still using legacy lights. I'll give you another example, which is, I think, very meaningful. The University of Alabama campus directly owns and controls 4,000 lights on the campus in Tuscaloosa. And if you remember, back in 2010, they had a terrible tornado that came to Tuscaloosa, and 2 co-eds lost their lives. The tragic piece about that news was that we supply Alabama Power with 1.6 million electric meters. And as each meter was losing power and signaling back to us losing power, Alabama Power was tracking the path of the storm very exactly, because they could see when the meters lose power, they send a message saying, "I've just lost power," and they track that in real time. And they could see the tornado moving towards Tuscaloosa. But Tuscaloosa itself and the campus is really like a mini city, much like Pittsburgh is. And they did not have a solution for outdoor lighting control or smart electric meters, so they had no way of knowing which part of campus would be hit. And there was no time for Alabama Power to tell them. So after that terrible event, they approached us and said, "We'd like to wrap our university with this lighting control, and primarily it's for safety." If they could grid the campus and know that there was an active shooter in Sector 7, which is not far-fetched, unfortunately, they could hit one button and flash all those lights in Sector 7. And that would be a visual indication of a lockdown. Or they could save money. During the summer, they close off 1 or 2 of the top layers of all the parking decks because students aren't in town with a push of a button. They save $25,000 a summer just on the energy consumption avoided by making that change. And then August 1st, they program the lights, and those lights in those parking decks go from 10% back to full brightness for safety. And that's a very easy way for them to save money. So it's maintenance savings, it's energy savings, it's public and co-ed safety. So this is a bit about what we supply. I asked for permission to speak because I thought no one probably knew just down the road a few miles a major company in the smart grid space had these types of solutions. I can imagine a network being put up in Chatham Park that would serve all the gas endpoints, all the water endpoints, town of Pittsburgh included, and all the lights. The lights that are on. I think that Duke Energy owns the street lights in Pittsburgh, so Cary has the same dilemma. They'd love to put a solution in, but they don't own their fixtures. Raleigh doesn't own their fixtures. But half the cities in the U.S. own their own fixtures, and half are owned by the utilities. So we're also talking to Duke Energy to see if they would allow a solution like ours to be used for the town of Cary on the existing network they have, or even the town of Pittsburgh. And the last thing I'll say about our solution is that we are deploying our lighting solution in cities that already have either a smart gas, water, or electric solution, and we're adding that application. We actually have some customers that have smart electric, gas, water, and lighting on one network, and that's very, very unusual in this particular space. So I wanted to bring that up, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. I'm trying to keep my comments short, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Or do you have any questions, Shelley? Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And
If I may, I just would like to share some thoughts to echo Mr. Noble's presentation. This is a brief memo that I've prepared regarding parallel research that I did with Charlie. I discovered a really interesting paper that that was just published in January of this year from Canada, and it's made up of 7 cities worldwide and 12 different street light installation projects. And from that study, it was clear to the authors that municipalities that choose not to install controls with their LED streetlights are missing out on 20% energy savings. I would assert that if the town of Pittsboro approves a policy for new street lighting that does not address controls, we may miss out on additional energy savings of 20% or more.
All right. Thank you. Ryan Miller, if you'll introduce yourself to the board. I don't have biographical material on either you or Charlie.
Not a problem. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Miller with the North Carolina Building Performance Association. So we are a not-for-profit trade association that represents the state's green builders and energy efficiency contractors and folks like that. I live in Raleigh, but I've tried to move here twice in the last 2 years, so please don't hold that against me with Raleigh. And so I was also at the Clean Tech Summit back in Raleigh regarding Chatham Park, and was just asked to put together a couple of comments about sort of the green building energy efficiency market in general and what some of the opportunities are for Chatham Park. So I apologize I don't have a presentation. I've got a handout, though, for the folks up here, if y'all don't mind. So, thank you. So I'll walk through this just so everybody can kind of hear the same comments, and I'll be happy to send this to anybody else. But just a quick why I'm here. Our trade association, like I said, represents companies that are involved in green building or high-performance construction, whatever you want to call it. We usually say high performance. And so we're advocates of that, but we don't have sort of a preferred way of doing that necessarily. We just want that to happen more in the market, and we believe in it for lots of different reasons of energy savings for the local community, sustainability, environmental reasons as well. But most importantly, we just think that people should be able to live and work in good homes and buildings. And so with Chatham Park coming in, it's an opportunity to look at different options for the different homes and buildings. No one here is paying me to go in any one direction. I'm just here to help answer some questions and just kind of provide an overview of sort of what some of the opportunities are. So the handout that I've provided is just 2 pages here. The first section is really pretty short. I was really asked to talk more about commercial buildings, and so on the residential side, just to give everybody a little bit of guidance, there's about 34 different formal ways to sort of certify or verify a home to be energy efficient or green or high performance in North Carolina. It's a lot of options. It's really too many. And so as you all look at either making requirements or suggestions to the folks who are going to be building in Chatham Park, it's a lot to take in. And so our association would be happy to help just look at those different programs. And we do have a consumer website that's called homeenergync.org. You're welcome to go there and you can kind of learn about some of those programs. Again, we're really just an advocate for good, sustainable, energy-efficient homes, but we don't have a favorite, so you can do some research there. On the commercial building side, that's what I was asked to speak more towards. There's several certifications, not as many as 34, fortunately, but I just wanted to touch on just a quick about for some of these, and I'll just see if I can take any questions. But a lot of folks know about the LEED building certification, so if you're familiar with the U.S. Green Building Council or maybe some of the museums or government buildings, you see that those are LEED certified. We kind of call that the flashy high-end green building certification. It's usually a little bit more expensive, a little bit more rigorous, but it's a good one. There have been some concerns lately with some LEED buildings essentially not getting sort of the performance results of those buildings, and so you think that they're going to save X amount of energy or X amount of water, and sometimes that's not happening. It's not on all cases, so that's definitely not a problem really with the certification. It just speaks to some of the complexity of the buildings that end up being LEED certified. So LEED is one option. ARC is sort of a different certification that comes also from USGBC. It's basically a lot of the rigor, but not the actual certification, not the plaque that goes on the building. So that's another option for a hotel, a hospital, commercial building as well. ASHRAE is sort of an engineering standard that's used as a baseline for basically commissioning a building to work well. So you'd have the HVAC system and the building envelope, meaning all the exterior connections of the building. You'd make sure that those are done well, and ASHRAE has standards for that you can set as a minimum requirement. One that most people in the room are probably familiar with is called ENERGY STAR. That's a baseline that a lot of folks will use for both residential buildings and for commercial buildings. That's sort of what if we had a recommendation for just what to look at as a minimum standard, we'd sort of look in that direction. That's commonly used, again, both in homes and buildings, and you get energy and water savings, but you're really not going to kind of that nth degree for sort of the green building side. And then on the second page, just a couple more points on this. Passive construction is basically using orientation of the building so that you're not setting the building up to be hot on one side. That's going to increase your air conditioning load, how much energy you're going to use in the middle of the summer. So passive construction, there's also certifications and requirements there. And then there's also just kind of some local programs that some of the developers or hotel chains may be looking at for Chatham Park specifically. But really, we just wanted to provide a little bit of insight into those programs, and then just suggest that as really the city and the developers are looking into different programs, some questions to consider is really, how far do you want to take sort of that greenness of these requirements? Do you really want to put Pittsboro and Chatham Park on the map as just the nth degree most sustainable city and development that could possibly be out there? Or do you want to scale that back a little bit and focus more on energy and water savings that would support more infrastructure here and hopefully not cost the town much more money and things like that? So there are different benefits for each one of these programs. There's a lot to choose from, and so I just wanted to make myself available in our association to help answer some of those questions, and certainly don't mean for this to be the end answer for this conversation, but we'll be happy to answer any questions and support you all as any way we can. So be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ryan Miller? Thank you very much, Ryan.
Matt?
Yes, please.
So, Brian, if I may, I don't mean this to quote you, but if I may just ask the challenging question, why is it that we would want a third party to be involved with claims of building performance? And again, could you repeat what performance is about?
Sure. So building performance to us is really focusing on all of those sort of tangible benefits that you get from a building. So a lot of people, with whether it's green building or you want to say building performance, will talk about energy usage and specifically energy efficiency. You also talk about water efficiency. So there's water savings. The city doesn't need as much water if the buildings are being built to be water efficient. You've also got health concerns. So a better building that performs better is going to be healthier. It's also going to be more safe. There's going to be control systems like what we were just hearing about from Census as well. And so there's some fringe benefits to that. So it's not just kind of the energy side of things. They're also worth more money. So whether it's on the residential side or the commercial side, when you go to then sell that building maybe down the road, or if you're operating that building, it's worth more. So you've got higher tenant satisfaction, you've got higher customer satisfaction as well. So a lot of different factors there. And then the first part of the question, to go back to that.
Why third party?
Why third party? So if you thought about building a building or maybe building a home and a warehouse, kind of like an assembly line for a car, you have a lot more control over a lot of things. You have a shipment of parts just sitting right next to you. You've got people that are not working in the rain. You've got controls and systems and tools and reliable electricity and things like that. And so you can really manufacture almost a pretty perfect car on an assembly line, right? Well, homes and buildings, in most cases, unless they're modular, are not built that way. And so they're built out in the weather, and you've got different crews and different subcontractors meeting different standards and things like that. So building is still a challenge. And so third-party certification is a strong recommendation from our industry to make sure that you've got good homes and buildings that not just the builder is looking at and saying, yes, I meet code, I meet maybe the ENERGY STAR program requirements, I meet maybe the National Green Building Standard requirements or EcoSelect or any one of these other programs, but you have an outside entity that in most cases is actually being paid by the builder to keep them in check. So that's really what it comes down to, is just having an outside third party make sure that the homes and buildings that you are going to be involved in building, so many of here, are really going to be quality buildings, and it benefits everybody in the long run because they'll last longer, they'll be worth more money, they're going to have lower insurance rates because they're better built structures, so a lot of different reasons.
That's great. So it sounds like Ronald Reagan's trust but verify. Not verification.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Brian, I had a question. I'm just curious, are there any rules of thumb, you were touching on the value or perhaps cost issue when you talk about a building being more valuable?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any rules of thumb about relative cost differential to a building that simply meets building code versus, let's say, a LEED certified platinum gold?
Generally speaking, it's hard to say. So the short answer is no. It really depends. If you're going to scope out, a code-built hotel versus maybe a LEED certified hotel, there's definitely going to be an added cost. You really have to look at specific cases. It depends on the architectural firm. It depends on the materials. It depends on where you're building and a lot of different factors. And so I had two folks that worked with me do some research on that. We couldn't come up with just kind of a straightforward answer. And I think that we'd be short-sighted in trying to suggest that there is a straightforward answer to that question. So it depends, but there is going to be some added cost for better construction. But, there's a lot of benefit to the added upfront cost and a lot of reasons.
Do they find any range that is worth mentioning?
It'd be hard to say. I think from the top end, we've heard 15% added cost in some cases. On the low end, I'd say it's probably 0%. Or maybe you could actually save money by building a better building. Unfortunately, it's really up to folks to sketch those out and do some design and some modeling and different considerations.
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Gecko's question, if I might. Broderick Chapel has about 46% of all green certified buildings. Is that correct in the state? And when you take that question on an individual building scale, that's really their marketing position. So their value proposition is that they're providing sustainable homes. That's what differentiates that community from many other communities. That, along with their focus on high-quality public realm. I guess that's the last tangible thing per building to get a metric there, but certainly as a mass of buildings, as a community, that's a value differentiator that adds value to that entire community that says, we value this. This is, when you're buying a house here, this is what you're buying into. It's a marketing proposition. It's real, it's substantive, and it's also a thing which lets the community communicate to the world and to potential residents what it is that they're standing for and what they're buying. Any comment on that? Or
we actually have that on the bottom of the second page of the handout. What's a question to consider is sort of what's the purpose of requiring better buildings. If you just want to be a code-built community, okay. If the town of Pittsburgh would like to market itself as a sustainably built community, obviously focusing on Chatham Park, then you can adopt local ordinances and put in minimum standards that are going to make sure that all homes and buildings work really well, whether they are plaqued with LEED or if they just really, really work and have really good benefits. But it's up to you all to work with the developers and make those decisions.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I'd just like to say to the board that from time to time when we attend conferences and workshops and come across new technologies such as we did at that Clean Cluster group, I think I know our agenda is tight tonight, but the fact is that we've got a lot to learn. I know I certainly do, not having any kind of engineering background, but if from time to time you wish for people to come, such as Triangle J is coming to speak on affordable housing, let's educate ourselves and bring that kind of thing forward to the board. So thank you all very much.
I'd like to thank our two speakers. I know what's already left, but that was very interesting and informative, and you've given us some websites to do some further study, so I appreciate that very much.
And the only reason Charlie left was that this is his wedding anniversary. So his wife was with him, and they were going to the Roadhouse to have their anniversary dinner. The second item under new business is site plan review for lot number 2, building 4 of Chatham Park. Victoria Bailiff will lead us in the site plan.
is site plan SP 2016-07. Chatham Development 1 Incorporated is seeking approval of Chatham Park Lot 2, Building 4. The proposal is to construct a one-story office building totaling 14,000 square feet along Freedom Parkway, west of the Roundtree Way intersection. The 3.28-acre parcel is currently vacant and located in the Chatham Park PDD. These are some elevations that have been provided. The Planning Board considered the proposed plans at their meeting on June 5th, 2017. The Board found the plans to be satisfactory and recommended approval in a vote of 6-0. These plans have been reviewed in accordance with the town's applicable development ordinances by the appropriate departments, and staff is recommending approval of the proposed request. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board?
I have one question. I did not see any stormwater management devices. I'm just curious how that's being managed.
There are...
Victoria Robinson.
Oh, okay, great.
Good evening, Rob Jogan, Withers Ravenel, on behalf of Chatham Development 1. But the stormwater devices, Mr. Biocco, we've actually got, you see SEM number 2 here. That is a bioretention area that will take most of the parking lot site. I'm an engineer at the point. Most of this area here and this area here, as well as the parking lot from the previous approved plan, collecting it and into here. There is some portion of this here that we're basically piping over to the hospice PMP that was designed for that.
Okay, yeah, those were the pipes I saw, and I didn't see them being routed anywhere. So they're going to be going to another device off-site.
Yes.
And all that parking lot's just going to sheet flow into
Correct.
the PMP.
Back.
And the roof, is that coming to?
It is.
Okay.
We've had it's been a challenge, but we've had to basically bring this site up. The building pad and the parking lot and everything was bring it back to this. So, you know, as you know, everything's going to go that way. So that's the reason we're saying, well, but 80% of this will go to the PMP right here.
Okay, thank you.
Is the lot currently already cleared for this?
No, the only thing we cleared was what was approved with the previous site plan. That was the staging, stockpile area. So it's probably from just the park. It's basically, and it was not for this. We head off to the site plan, so we have hopefully get approval. So it's really only probably 40% of this cleared, but that is tied into what was needed to construct this. Because this is operating as a DMP and a stormwater device for the erosion control device for the previous building crew.
Are these going to be general offices or part of the medical community?
General office right now, so further comment on that, but that's general office is what we got set up there.
Further questions for either Victoria or Ryan Wilson? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Michael Pietro, seconded by Jay Farrell. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Chatham Park Master Plan text amendment. Looking tonight at general provisions, open space, landscaping, tree protection, and stormwater. Thank you, Jeff Jones.
Thank you. So tonight, in an effort to give this board a little bit more time to review these 5 elements of Chatham Park, you all received generally the same packet that the planning board received in early June. And then they held their meeting last Monday, on these particular elements. I'll give you a little timeline of how we've got to where we are. There was a public hearing held back in March on these particular elements. Chatham Park Committee gave a recommendation to the town back in February, to this board back in February. From that's when the public hearing was scheduled to move forward. The Plan Board's meeting back in, I want to say it was May, Plan Board meeting in May, the Plan Board heard responses from Chatham Park. They compiled all the comments received to date, and then Chatham Park responded to those. After the May meeting with Planning Board, Chatham Park did revisions to those elements. That's what you all received in the packet a little bit earlier, and then there was one element that was in this packet that was sent to you last week. So again, in an effort to give you a little bit more time to ask questions of the applicant, to ask staff any questions, you can do so now at this meeting, or talk amongst yourself. I will say that at the Plan Board meeting, the Plan Board did not give a recommendation. They wanted to hold off and get a recommendation or get a memo from the chair of the Additional Elements Committee. We have received that memo, so that will be forwarded on to the Plan Board for their next board meeting. And Mr. Nass is here, and he can speak to any questions that you all may have on his thoughts on the revised elements as submitted. If this progresses as planned, this would come back to you at your next meeting for additional thoughts and consideration, potentially with vote on any of these particular elements. But again, the applicant is here. We can answer any questions if you have any. I know it's a lot to get through. I can tell you that just today, staff met with Chatham Park on the stormwater element. That's probably an element that's going to continue to be refined over the next couple of weeks leading up to the Planning Board meeting, particularly the manual, the stormwater manual. So we're working hard with Chatham Park on that. So there wouldn't have been a recommendation from the Planning Board, even if they wanted to do one last week on the stormwater, because it's a little incomplete right now. But I do believe everyone's here that can answer any questions that you may have.
Well, regretfully, I traveled last weekend, and on Friday, when things were delivered, I was not in. And when I got home, I had a waterlogged planning board envelope, which I didn't bother to look in. Had I would have received this instead of seeing this for the first time tonight. So I'm not in a very good position to ask intelligent questions on these elements, unfortunately. So.
Do we have a copy of Mr. Nass's memorandum?
You don't have. I just got it yesterday on Sunday, and I will provide that to the Plan Board and to you all within the next couple of days.
So how do you want to proceed here? Do we want to ask Mr. Nass to answer any questions, or Jeff Jones, or we have, of course, the red line in the finished version of landscaping and signage here.
Signage will be the next step that will take it under old business. It should be you've got landscaping in this packet, but there was an additional package that I sent out to you all back in late May, June timeframe, whenever Planning Board packets went out. Those went out as well. So there were 3 elements in that packet, and the landscape element was omitted from that packet. And that's what you got delivered last week. Certainly, that's a lot of information to go through. This is just an opportunity for you all to hear from me, to introduce it to you all, and if you had questions, we're here to try to answer any of those questions. If not, certainly take more time to read through these. As soon as I get new drafts, especially of stormwater and they're ready to be submitted. Those will be passed along as soon as I have them. And again, the plan board will be potentially making a recommendation at the July meeting.
What's that date for the July planning board
The
meeting?
5th. It will be moved to Wednesday, the 5th, because of the holiday.
The July 5th is the next planning board meeting that we'll discuss this.
That's correct.
And Mr. Knapp, the committee will, the additional element committee will have that memo to you.
Mr. Nass has already provided that memo to
And then
me.
you'll provide it to us.
I will, yes.
Because I like to review it along with.
Yes, I will send it via email to you all tomorrow and along with the plan board.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. Under the Robeson Creek Linear Park and Open Space South Village, one of the things it said was that 300 acres, there'll be 300 acres of contiguous protected land that includes land along Robeson Creek. But I'm just wondering how many of those acres are actually on Chatham Park property?
Yeah, that would be a good question for Chatham Park.
I'm just trying to get a sense of actual how much parkland is going to be included. Because I'm concerned about we have such a limited amount of open space. There's a lot of things that count towards open space, and I just think I'm surprised to see. But okay, so how many acres?
All of those acres that are mentioned are on Chatham Park's property. There is other open space adjacent to it with the riparian buffer along Robeson Creek that's off property. So the actual open space assemblage in that area will be more acres than that. But the acreage we control is the number we represent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Jeff, can you describe that? I was surprised to see that street buffers would count as open space. Is there something, I know streetscape buffers, capitalize as something different. I'm wondering how much land we're talking about would qualify as streetscape buffers, because it just sounds to me that would be open space. It's not going to be like, oh, sure, let's go play on this the next.
So I think that could be something that you all would want to ask the applicant, maybe the next time, but this is my stab at it. Master plan set up that any lands controlled by the HOA or the property owner or property owners association could be considered open space. That was what was in the master plan. That was one of the 5 defining open space terms. But I think what we could do is set a parameter of what that should look like.
That's a bit shocking to see required road frontage be counted as open space. I was not happy to see that. I also had a question about under the small-scale urban and suburban open spaces on page 5, where some of the playgrounds would be private. Does that mean private in the sense that they would not be open to the public?
They would be open to those residents that probably live within that residential neighborhood.
But not to all the taxpayers.
That's correct.
So I also have a problem with that space that is limited to only certain segments of the population, that I have a hard time counting that as the town's open space.
Well, it wouldn't be, it would not be dedicated to the town. That would be open
You
space.
talk about open space a lot, right?
I don't think so, no. That would be a question for Chatham Park. But I do
That question came up during the master plan, and there was agreement that no private facility.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to do is there is give the town some guidance on development plan review, that if a designated area would be open space, we have to be able to review it against some sort of ordinance. And this is the ordinance, the technical arrangement that would say a plaza or something like this can be considered open space. It does not have to be public open space. But I still need to be able to say, yes, that's open space.
So I'm not clear on that, because that was the other thing too, with the business plazas and the private swimming pools and those sorts of things. If it's not open to the general public, then I'm concerned that would be counted against the town's allotment.
I do not believe that. I think Chatham Park could come up here right now and answer that question for you.
But that's important.
Because I think it's supposed to be, the allotment is public open space. So if you would like Chatham Park to answer that question,
Yes.
please ask them to come up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear everything in the back. If you wanted to start at the beginning. First one was streetscape buffers.
Yes, streetscape buffers. We'll start with that.
Okay. First, let me, in the master plan, there was a clear delineation between recreation space, open space. So we're not trying to get recreation credit for any of these things that we're calling open space. And that's point number one. Number two, in your proposed UDO, and I don't know how much y'all have gotten into that yet, everything that we've listed as open space possibilities in Chatham Park and this element are listed in your proposed UDO as open space possibilities for the town. So it's not going outside of the boundaries of what typically open space is considered to be in municipalities. And I think what I did here was, I don't think that you could go play in streetscape buffers along the road. And that's not the intent of those. And the parks are for play. Open spaces is to retain trees and unpaved, undeveloped area. So if that helps differentiate between the two. But it's not paved. It's not anything going on there other than providing landscaping, grass, and trees by your ordinances and by our element that we consider that to be open space. Well, that's there too. It includes all those things.
So if there's a nice amount, then. Okay, my other questions were about the parks as well as the business plazas.
Private play. What was it? Playground. The first one.
Playground was the first
Yeah.
one.
Again, we're not trying to get public park credit for that space. And in going through staff comments, they wanted to be able to take these miscellaneous spaces that are going to be in neighborhoods and put that in some category. And also, if we did not include those sorts of things, make recommendations that we would be including these little open space opportunities that are programmed into the neighborhood. And so this is not trying to be a park that is for everyone in town, but it is taking something that might be a piece of play equipment that's in the middle of 10 lots that it's going to be used by the people right around that area. So it was trying to put a definition on something so when Jeff or the rest of the planning staff is making some recommendations of what the kind of features they would like to see programmed into, I think primarily in that case would be a single-family neighborhood, that it gave them tools and definitions to be able to refer to.
What is in charge of maintaining those parks, the playgrounds?
Well, parks, public, would belong to the town.
Right, but as far as any private community?
That would be our HOA.
Okay. So the thing would go under you talked about the tennis courts, swimming pools, basketball courts, slides. That also.
Right. If that's in a piece of ground that we are not dedicating to the town for its recreation system, those sorts of facilities could meet that requirement.
Okay, how that doesn't become something that town eventually.
So you're still getting your 1/25th of an acre per dwelling unit. This is in addition to those things.
I have questions just about. So this is under the list of things that count as open space. And one of them also was basically any land. It sounds like any land that's not being used that would count as open space. And again, this does not go towards the final amount.
Well, it was trying to, that particular one was just trying to be a catch-all. If it was without being able to contemplate what could be every example out there, and there are 10 or 12 examples that are delineated in the element. It was just trying to be a catch-all for things that came up that everyone looks at and says that's open space. Just didn't know what to call it.
To clarify, I know you have some large power lines going through the property.
And we're not trying to take.
So you're going to say that the space under the power line is going to take up some of our...
If I did that, you would do unkind things to me. And I didn't answer your question about the, I think the plazas. Restate the question. I just remember that topic.
I think that falls in the same kind of category. The business plazas would also, that would not also not count as some of our allotted services.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's already in the master plan of allowing those smaller, hard-scaped, open areas that are amenities outside of offices or retail areas. So that's already in there, one. But two, again, it was giving Jeff the ability to make recommendations when we were coming in with site plans or subdivision plans of different tools in his toolbox, saying we would like to see you include this in this situation if we haven't already been doing that.
So one request would be in these spaces that it sounds like there's a lot of pavement or whatever, hard surface, that maybe we include some wording that either encourages permeable surfaces or includes water features that the water runoff somehow benefits land.
Sure, I agree with that. I think it's a great idea.
If there's no such wording in there, I think that would be nice to have.
But I don't know that every one should be required to do that because every situation is different. But there are other things that you could be doing to program. I think you're talking about programming that space in different ways. Mr. Fiocco and I have talked about this. He's actually more passionate about this than I am, or at least he has been in the past. Maybe he's mellowed since he's been overseas. But I know that he has given me very good reasons why he thinks those spaces are absolutely in the open space category. I tend to agree with that. But I don't think it has to be. That's not to say that a resident could not come sit in a plaza area outside of if we had a fire station or a courthouse or an office building. I don't think anybody's going through there and policing who's sitting on a bench in a plaza like that. But at the same
time, plazas, just for the record, I think they're in high population areas where people would use them a lot. I think they're a great feature. I'm not opposed to that. I'm just concerned about reducing the amount of space we have available to our parks.
But this would not reduce your park space. Yeah, this is in addition to your park space.
I think that covers my questions.
Let me piggyback on that. One of the things that I'm interested to think about is the point that I think Beth was making about street buffers counting as open space. So I asked myself, well, what is open space? Is this a permanently dedicated, protected area? And if the answer is yes.
So if you want me to answer that question, the answer is yes. We're talking about, because that's a great question. I mean, what we've been asking as people come in and submit site plans or subdivision plans, we've been asking that when you turn in a site plan, if you are not willing to see this space located on a plat and designated as permanent open space. For example, if you think you may expand your parking lot into that area or something like that, we'll only be platting the areas that are permanently going to be reserved as open or preserved as open space. So yes, that's the answer to that question.
So the other idea is, you don't want your children to play in a street buffer. Well, if that street buffer is 200 feet deep of trees, maybe it's okay. And I think about that, and I think about the corollary to that question of permanently protecting something. So somebody comes in, they do a development, and they say that 20 feet along the street, and I'm going to plant with trees and shrubs, I'm going to permanently protect it. Well, 10 years later, they've got to change the plan, and they want to get into that space, and now Jeff's got a track, the town's got a track. Can you get into that space? No, you can't. Can I change this plan? Can I get an amendment? Where am I going to get that open space? Where's it going to go? Somewhere else on the property? That's why I think it really gets kind of cumbersome if it is those perimeter buffers, like the street guard and the side guard, if those are actually counting towards open space. I think it could be very problematic. And so I'm not convinced that those types of buffers are appropriate designations of open space unless they've got some meaningful dimension to them, where it is obvious, no, this is a standard street, this is an area that's not going to be developed again. So that's where I'm thinking. That's the part of what I'm thinking about, trying to figure out what's a reasonable area to say, here's the minimum standard to call that open space. The other thing to think about also is making sure that none of this open space, none, zero, is on a residential lot. Because I don't want the town to have to tell somebody you can't cut that tree in your backyard to put your swing set up. So all that open space has got to be outside of residential lots.
In regard to those, one of the things at least we've been working with staff on is just making sure that we've got language that gives assurances that those protections are in place, so that the burden is on Chatham Park. The burden is not on staff. And so, we've been devising a system that we're the ones that are constantly updating an overall. And I think the Additional Elements Committee, made this request, but that there's this tabulation of open space that's continuously ongoing throughout the development of the project, so you can see where we are compared to where we should be, and also that it does have protections on it. So those are good questions that we've been working on to this point, and I anticipate there'll be some of your comments that we get that we'll be responding to.
And I really think that the three, probably these four, will work together intricately and are inseparable. You can pull out stormwater, perhaps.
No, you won't be able. Not the way the direction is going.
Okay.
No, I mean it's really. I think it's gone in a good direction, primarily because of Mr. Jones and Mr. Royal leading us there with some of the things they want included in that. And it doesn't show up in the language of the element, but it's going to be part of an addendum, say, in the package of the manual or things like that, because it's a sort of thing that will be constantly evolving through time as new stormwater methodologies are devised and other things come up. We didn't want to literally give a list in the element because 2 years from now it'll be outdated, but we are working on that now, and planning board will get that first, and then you'll see that.
Yeah, stormwater system changes daily. But I do think tree protection, open space, and landscaping are critical that they work together, and that's the way I'm thinking about it.
On the subject of streetscapes not being open space, I could see in a situation where you have a housing development that wants to have a nice entrance, but some of that can be open space. I think if they know their residential.
And I'm just trying to think, are there minimum dimensions that make it recognizable as open space and not just a street yard?
But I think also with the performance criteria of what's going on in that space. I mean, dimension is one of the elements of performance criteria, but also how is it treated? If it's just grass, is that open space? If it's planted to a certain standard, does that then make it open space? I mean, those are the kind of questions you get into when you start discussing these points.
One of the things we talked about in here too are medians, and I know something we had talked about a while ago is that in the more dense parts of Chatham Park, if possible, it may be consistent with what we had talked about, but having the median wide enough so that down the road, if we want to add rail, there's a space for it. And I don't know if that's something that Chatham Park has thought about, setting aside the parts that are going to be more dense.
I don't know what you mean by, did you say rails?
Like rail or...
Oh, light rail. Oh, I got you now.
I was just thinking, I know a lot of communities are doing that now, where they're just creating wide medians. They don't need rails yet, but they're anticipating that they will, and so they're creating these medians so that they could put rails there.
We've joined, again, this is more on us trying to watch out for issues like that. I agree with you, and we joined the Regional Transportation Alliance that right now is primarily looking at Wake County, Orange County, and Durham County. But part of the reason we're there is we're trying to get Chatham County and other areas that are going to really start to be part of this region as development occurs, that's in the conversation of looking at transit and how that works. And I know that a lot of this is going in the direction of bus rapid transit as opposed to light rail, but still a corridor like that is required.
Right, because I think Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill is all going to be
No, you're absolutely right.
And then I think buses can feed into the rail, but a lot of communities do. It sounds like a lot of the trends are going underground again.
I think a lot of, really because of expense, a lot of the trend is going towards bus rapid transit, and that, Mr. Bond's nodding his head like he, I mean, not many people are completely aware of what that is, but you should go. I would encourage. I mean, we do enough. You should be taking trips to other places, and Nashville has a great bus rapid transit system. Nashville. And you can go see the terminal they've created and just the way they're doing that. I mean, there are a number of places around the country that will give you a lot of these answers without you having to reinvent or invent the wheel.
I think they're so changing in all areas right now.
It's great to be here, though, in a situation where you're not trying to retrofit something. I mean, it's just it's a matter of what we're trying to do here is build it in at the beginning.
Curious about the bus rapid transit. Is it a dedicated lane or is it mixing with other vehicles?
You're not mixing in the situations I'm aware of. You're not mixing with other vehicles. You've dedicated a space for it.
Is it on the outside lane?
I think probably depending on whether you're trying to retrofit or whether it's new.
Bus rapid transit is basically buses, but it's just a special lane underneath. Is that how it works?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And you can link multi-buses and do all kinds of.
This is an interesting, kind of surprising conversation. I really wasn't prepared to discuss these items. Like you, Mr. Fiocco, I hadn't had time to read them, but I want to affirm and echo your thought on the kind of trepidation about using streetscape buffers in particular as designation of open space, because in my mind, open space is something that a community sets aside intentionally with future plans yet unknown. And it could be a grand vision of a central park eventually when density gets great enough, or it could be something entirely different. But I think of, you asked what is open space, and I think of open space as being central and accessible. And maybe a third thing, I'm not really sure how to define this, but usable. And I think that goes to the point you made, a 200-foot buffer is more usable. You might consider letting your kids play in a 200-foot buffer rather than a 50-foot streetscape buffer. And it's for those reasons that I am concerned. And I'll call it future-proofing because I think it's about that vision. It's about the vision of where we're going to be 25 years from now. That's what I think of when I think of open space. So
I would just say if you have a really special grove of trees, that might be designated as green space that would be along the side of the road. I think there's a place for your constituents to say, no, we don't count that.
But may I respond to this one?
Sure.
I mean, I agree with a great deal of what you say. But I would also say every time and this has been happening within our office too. You said, but I'm concerned about someone being able to go play in it. The point of open space is not really to go play in it. That's what the recreation space is for. That again, we're trying to do this and not double dip. This is recreation space. This is open space, and there are many benefits to open space beyond playing in it. And actually, I think you could probably preach on it more than I could, but just the preservation and restoration of tree canopy. They're in topsoil and many benefits towards open space. And usability, certainly there is open space that should be usable, but there's also open space that really you're not trying to use. And it's there for protections from many other things. So, I mean, we'll get into, I realize, I think Jeff introduced it well. The point was not, I mean, we'll be having these conversations again. The point was not to try to, it was just so that you've got more time to absorb all this information when we do start talking about it in a few weeks.
I
Thank you.
have
there further questions for the additional elements that we're looking at tonight?
So that's just on. As a space, we're going to also talk about the
I think we want to be able to discuss them well enough so that then we'll be able to make a decision. The formal action at the next meeting, on June 26th.
Oh, well, I don't think I can do that. I think I'll need to have my own set prepared, questions and comments. Yeah. I don't mind at all, Commissioner Foley sharing her questions, concerns, comments, but I wouldn't want to presume that this is the time that we're dedicated to hashing this stuff out. I still haven't prepared for that.
And we have only one meeting in July, and that will be towards the end of July, is that correct?
I just had a comment to make about tree protection. Maybe this will get you all into, but one of my concerns when I read the introduction, I would like to see more language about, talks about how, there's not much difference between whether you protect existing trees or, we just plant new ones. I feel like there needs to be language in there that really stresses the importance of protecting the existing trees, especially trees that are significant. And I would like to see more language in the introduction about that. It can take 50 to 200 years to grow significant trees. So it talks about how, you plant trees and they become significant, but it takes a long time for that to happen. And I would like for that kind of language to be included as well, just to protect the really significant trees. I know that's covered in other areas. I know where some of the significant trees are protected in open space, but just to throw that out. And also, I have contacted Catherine Denninger about some of these things, and she provided a chart. There's a chart on page 3. And I felt like these numbers were very low, the percentages. And she was able to provide a chart that shows what some other communities are doing. The numbers are higher, and I would like for us to consider raising those numbers. There's a lot of questions, too, just about on page 4, where it talks to site plans and subdivision plans with average lot size of 10,000 square feet or less shall include clearing and grading information. It sounds like there are no restrictions there, so they can just come in and clear it if it's lots that are 10,000 square feet or less. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's been the original element. Yeah.
I would like that. But then later it says that also applies to lots that are 10,000 square feet or more, greater than 10,000 square feet. So that would apply that all lots they could just go in and clear everything. So that doesn't sound like much of a tree ordinance.
It's more than the 10% that they originally.
Not if you're clearing everything. That's what this applies to.
Well,
you can clear everything.
that question is good for Chatham Park. I'm not defending their product for them.
Third paragraph down on page 4.
I will say that we have the same chart or very similar chart in the draft UDO.
And I will share with you all the chart that I saw today.
That would I would like to see that from UDO as well.
Sure.
So anything that's being shared, I'd like to see.
Definitely.
Okay.
Chart's pretty hard to read.
Probably in the red stripe.
I've got the green background, those are very dark. I've got text.
Yeah, that's why I think that's why they provide you a clean copy as well, so you might be able to see that.
I was also bothered by the fact that if it's, if I can find it. Anyway, yeah, if you guys look at the language on page 4, the only paragraph subdivision plans for subdivisions with average lot size of 10,000 square feet or less shall include clearing and grading information for the property or applicable phase of the property. Property for which there is an approved site plan or property for which there is an approved subdivision plan for average lot size of 10,000 square feet or less may be cleared and graded in whole or in part to accommodate construction of improvements on that property. Lots and property for which there is an approved subdivision plan for average lot size greater than 10,000 square feet may be cleared and graded to prepare building paths for dwellings and to prepare other areas for improvements to be constructed on the lot as may be necessary to prevent or correct drainage issues. So I guess I'm concerned about the words such as cleared and whole, cleared and graded in whole. What does that mean? Does that mean the sound that we just go in and cut down everything?
Yeah. Well, but I think the 10,000 square foot lot size is very, very small.
Okay, down here it says also for properties of 10,000 square feet and above. So that would basically be everything.
Okay.
So why would you?
I was thinking it was more like a really compact neighborhood, townhouses.
Look right here, it says also.
Okay.
That's not very favorable to trees. That's the paragraph in there.
Are there any more questions from the board for Jeff on these sections?
There was one thing that was taken out on page 8, under section F. It says if trees are to be planted to satisfy part or all of the TCA requirements of this element, the description of the location and types of trees. That was removed, and it seems to me it would be nice to know, have some say about what kind of trees. If you're taking out forest, that we have some say about what gets replanted. It's not just crepe myrtles or different trees, that if you're taking out significant trees, it's something that's significantly planted in its place. I would like to see the town have some say about the kinds of trees that get planted, whether it's native trees or to have some say.
Does this go to the tree survey that we had in our UDO?
Yeah, and they're going to provide one as well.
They are. But wouldn't that what be what Commissioner Foley just described? Language that was description of the types of trees and language having been removed.
There could be other elements. Again, ask Child Park those questions. Please prepare questions for them to answer. I mean, that's really what we have to do. We're kind of they can't answer anything unless you ask them. Have them come up. Have them come up. That's how we get.
I just want to say that we have such a gem here in Chatham County. It's the last significant forest in the Piedmont, and what a gem we have here. Other communities would love to have what we have. So we should be doing everything we can to protect it because it's going to make this area so attractive. It's going to make people want to live here. And as commissioners, we have a responsibility to make sure that we protect it. Because you can't, once it's taken away, it can't be replaced. So that's one quick one. So yes, I'd like to hear that answer to that question. About
I'm sorry, I keep sitting down. I shouldn't. And I just going to start at the beginning again.
I'm curious about the paragraph that I read aloud.
Oh, the 10,000 square foot lots?
And less than 10,000.
Less than and greater. Right. And I'm doing this by memory without the language in front of me. The first is talking about smaller lots, and I don't know that your ordinance your future ordinances contemplate this. Your existing ordinances, I think, have generally dealt with a 10,000 lot size, 10,000 square foot lot size is the minimum unless you're getting into some special situations. When you and Mr. Fiocco is going in this direction, I think, with some of the things he was saying, when you start putting together a lot smaller than 10,000 square foot by the time you get your building pad in for the house, by the time you get your driveway in there, by the time you get your utilities in there, the streets in there, that you're not saving a lot of trees in those smaller lot situations. And so that's why the ordinance or the element as is proposed still gives you a percentage of trees that are going to be saved that are outside of the lots, that are in other places in those situations. Then when it's talking about lots larger than that, the intent of that language is not to do the same thing with larger lots. It's just to be able to get your streets in and to be able to clear for the footprint of your house. From our standpoint, every tree we can save makes it a lot more valuable. We're not trying to just go in there and take all those trees down.
I think that wording is not really clear.
Okay, we can work on that.
Some developments do come in and protect significant trees, and they are. They're immediately more desirable. People like having big trees in here. My neighborhood that I live in did not do that, and unfortunately, there's an absence of good sense of trees. I mean, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it will, but I think it's important to try to do as good as possible.
Well, I mean, there's a great deal of the language that's changed in the element that talks about preserving trees within subdivisions and within non-residential areas. I'm not going to sit down now until you.
Any further questions for Chuck?
And you're right, Mr. Bonds, this is not the last time we'll be doing that.
Chuck, would you have any thoughts to amplify what Jeff has told us about the process of development of the stormwater manual? I understand that's a really tight collaborative between our staff and your folks.
To this point, I think it's been working pretty well, and most of what I'll say is you've heard Mr. Royal, I think, in other meetings talk about his desires to see your stormwater ordinance go for the town, in the direction he wants to see your ordinance go for the town. And so we've been trying to incorporate those thoughts into this element, or into the ranking system. We're having a ranking system that you will accumulate points and lose points when you take out certain natural resources, and you can gain them back by doing, we're calling them uplifts, that maybe soil amendments or preserving extra tree canopy beyond what the tree protection element requires, and different things like that. And that's why earlier I told Mr. Fiocco it probably does work more hand in glove than he may think of tying into tree protection and landscaping. But you'll be able to see that when this information comes to you. Yes, sir.
Further questions?
Chuck, I have one on in the general provisions. It says that any element may be amended in the same manner as amended to the text of the town building zoning ordinance and the UDO. But I assume that will allow us at any time to revisit or rewrite any element as needed. And the reason I'm asking this is the gentleman that spoke on the lighting control. What are we going to have 10 years technology that can improve any of these elements? Now, I'm not just talking about these 4 or 5 that's right here, the signage or lighting or anything. But what are we going? How are we going to be able to go back and improve our elements if we don't have anything in writing that the town can revisit, rewrite the amendment with the board and Chatham Park together? I didn't see anything in provisions regarding that.
Well, the language you just pulled out of the additional provisions is getting at that subject. It's been a little bit confusing for people, but what we're saying is if you have gone through the tree protection ordinance, for example, and have approved that, that's our development ordinance for Chatham Park. If there are elements elements, not the right word, we're using the word elements too. If there are new, innovative strategies that come in regarding tree protection or standards that get into that are left silent in the element, then if you adopted an ordinance that required that, then we fall under the things that we're silent to in our standards. Anything that we've covered, the size of a parking space is 9 feet by 18 feet. If you come back and say we want all parking spaces to be 7 by 15, you've already approved it that we are 9 by 18. So it's kind of in an area between you do have control in that you approve every one of these, and so if there's language in there you don't like to see, then we talk about it. But some of this gets into Mr. Messick and Mr. Eagle, and I mean these are ordinances that you're approving, and then that's the law. If we're silent to it, and we use Mr. Bonnett's example of if you were pulling out food waste and wanted to put that in a separate dumpster, you adopt an ordinance that requires that of all development, then we follow that and have to do it.
So I guess, Jay, that language is simply saying this is the process by which it will be amended?
Right, and it follows the same process as that you're
they can propose
requiring a public hearing or other things like
the
that.
town can propose an amendment, but until the two agree, it's not going to be an amendment. Right. Yeah. But there's a mechanism to change it.
Mr. Farrell, I agree with you. I think that section could deal with more clarification. And I have a vague recollection that Mr. Messick has put forward some ruminations on this in an email some time ago to Mayor Perry. And I'm wondering if we might revisit that and ask that additional amplification or clarification be brought to the general provisions on that point. I think it's troublesome to a lot of people.
20 or 30 years is a long time, and a lot changes in 20 years.
Yeah, which almost, in my thinking, almost makes it really desirable to have check-in points or revisiting. And if we can meet and say, it's been 5 years and the technology has changed to such an extent that we don't need plug-ins for electric vehicles anymore because they ran off the sun.
We don't have vehicles anymore.
We don't have vehicles. It seems to be that we ought to be able to revisit those kinds of things.
Well, I know that another part of the response we gave to this question in the information we given a few weeks ago talked about the development agreement. There's an annual look at the development agreement that allows you to revisit certain things like that. And so we talked about that being one of the checks that are out there, as opposed to this, being memorialized forever.
Thank you, Jay. That's really important. Brother, was that checked again?
I'm not only going to say
Work those knees.
All right, so where are we?
Just moving on to the next item, if y'all so choose. We'll go back one. There we go. Okay, so the next agenda item will go into old business, and this is the additional elements, the first set. If we remember at our last meeting back in May, you all found that phasing and parking and loading was acceptable, and you had a vote, and that vote passed for phasing and parking. And part of those, the other two elements within the first set is signage and lighting. And we were getting late into the night, and there was several things that needed to be changed by Chatham Park in the signage section. And they have changed those, gotten a copy of that. I did get word today that there was 2 words that were not changed, and it was referring to, I think, from a element or ordinance, and there was some language that needed to change on that. That has changed. I have received that. But tonight is the continuation of your deliberation on Shadow Park's lighting and signage. And you all can undertake either one first. And again, Shadow Park's here. It was public hearing held back in December and in March. The Additional Elements Committee gave you their recommendations back in December. The Plan Board made a recommendation back in March. And then we've had a workshop on these elements as well back in May. And we are trailing along on this last 2 here, first set. Any questions that you might have or discussion amongst yourselves?
Well, I don't want to jump in front of anybody else if anyone has anything else, but I had promised the board that I would be finalizing my questions and concerns on these two elements for tonight. So, shall I? Okay. So, an overall concern on the lighting element is that there's new substance in the additional element on lighting, and I don't believe that some of those items have been reviewed by the review committee. And there are new deletions too, I believe, that were not highlighted in the red line. So that's kind of a high-level comment, but let's dive into it. My first item, I have a question about the applicability statement. So it seems that this applicability statement, it's just unclear to me. So do all streets and thoroughfares and boulevards inside the PDD apply? Yes. Okay. So there's the current, my current reading of the applicability statement is that this limits the lighting element to properties inside of site plans. And I'm not sure how they proceed if, for example, Chatham Park Way, where it intersects with East Street, is there a site plan put forward for streets that don't have properties in the immediate proposal for development?
There would not be a plan for streets by themselves, so they would be always associated with subdivisions or mostly subdivisions. That's where you're going to have your streets laid out on that.
So that'd be thoroughfares and boulevards?
Potential. If they're NCDOT streets, we may not see those as Shadow Park Way is an NCDOT street. That's under their purview.
We won't see that.
We and staff have seen it, but it's not.
But we're not given an opportunity to weigh in on it.
It's not something we approve. It's a DOT street. There's much more town streets than those.
Yeah. I just estimated, looking at the small area plan, ballpark, and this probably doesn't even consider those secondary neighborhood streets, but I'm estimating 25 miles of thoroughfares and boulevards and streets, and so that's a big chunk of public rights of way, public thoroughfares that would be.
Let's get Chatham Park up here and clarify that, because I'm trying to tell you that those would be part of what we would review.
They would? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Please ask Chatham Park that.
Okay, all right.
But now the street light standards will be to the town of Pittsburgh's requirements. Because we are leasing all our lights from Duke, and so we're limited to what they will supply. And so really, not a design feature of the development community. They will have Duke Power put in the lights that the town requires. it's not part of a subdivision. Well, it's part of the subdivision review and getting the spacing right.
That's correct.
And making sure those lights are the ones that the town wants.
Correct.
But site plan, those will be privately designed, privately installed lighting standards that I think this element is trying to address. They're not trying to address what are the street standards that are whatever Pittsburgh says. And what Duke can provide, less.
That's
Like
generally.
we heard earlier tonight, I mean, part of what we heard tonight was some cities have their own streetlights. They manage their own light, private, well, public lights, but it's not by the utility providing the power to them. And I think we've got a license agreement with Duke, and the contract says you'll provide these lights, and here's the cost of these lights. And you put them up, you maintain them, you change the bulbs, clean the bulbs and all that, for a fixed rate for every pole in town.
That's part of us accepting the road. After it's built, sidewalks are in, curbs in, lights are in, we have to accept the road. Any one of those standards are not up to town standards or a Chatham Park standard. We don't have to accept it. And we'd ask them to correct that.
Mm-hmm. The development committee doesn't even install the lights. Duke Energy does.
Yes, so I'm going to return to that. My next item is in Section 7, the exemptions. There's a specific exemption for public and private streets and private driveways. I can understand private driveways being exempt, but there's this gray area here with the I mean, how will you enforce that? How do you interpret that, Jeff? So, public and private streets.
But we would have
being
a street lighting ordinance for the town, and they have to adhere to that. We already have a street lighting ordinance for the town.
Even if it's a private street, in a site plan.
You could ask them that.
Okay, do that. That sounds like an edit that's needed.
I don't know. I haven't seen these questions before.
Okay.
And neither has the applicant.
Yeah.
Time given, we can probably answer these questions.
That'd be great.
Well, I'm thinking that private streets are typically held to public construction standards. So I'm thinking, even though they're privately maintained, it's still up to the public standard. And one of the reasons is you want to make sure that emergency services can be provided to those buildings, residences on a private street. Yeah. So you build them so that that equipment can arrive. And I would think that includes lighting.
It would.
Well, the language in that particular section was originally municipal lighting, quote-unquote municipal lighting on public streets or town property, and now it's also including private streets. So it is confusing. And maybe we'll save these up for Chuck and ask him to come back in a few minutes. Why? Oh, well, this one would definitely be for Chuck. Curious about the elimination of the prohibition on flashing, moving, revolving, rotating, scintillating, blinking, flickering lights that vary intensity and color and all that. That's gone. We used to or the element used to prohibit that. Special purpose lighting. So, Jeff, this is for you. Special purpose lighting, Section 6. Lighting for all the listed purposes there need not comply with the technical requirements of the element and are to be allowed as an administrative alternative to be approved by you. this section?
No, I don't. I need those comments to me. I can't answer that question right on. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, that's fair enough.
It'd been nice to have those comments. I don't have it, so.
I understand. Okay. All right.
I think you provided it 20 minutes before the meeting.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was up till 3 a.m. last night working on it. And I worked significant late nights all last week as well. So, okay.
Why don't we have Chatham Park come up, because those are questions that need to be answered by them.
Sure.
If there's
All right,
additional
so let me
staff
see if there's one more.
questions, then I will answer those.
I won't trouble you with this last one. I think I am curious about your insights on it, but I'm not going to trouble you with it. So let's ask Mr. Chuck Smith to come aboard. If you will. Yeah,
It's good to see y'all again. Chuck Smith, Chatham Park.
So Chuck, the applicability statement in the lighting element, help me understand that problem.
Okay, I would say, as you were doing, it's used in concert with the exemption language that you were referring to later in the element.
Mm-hmm.
So it's saying, except as otherwise provided, which are in those exemptions, that these standards apply to everything requiring a site plan.
But it doesn't apply to the streets that don't require a site plan.
Well, those are yours.
Thoroughfares or DOTs.
Yeah, they are ours. So if you decide you want no lighting on those streets, that's up to you.
Okay. Oh, big, thick documents, so many words, so many phrases. I don't know why it was that confused me so. Is it because that thoroughfares, the word thoroughfares and boulevards are indeed in this element?
And I'll agree with you on some of we're getting into DOT language, and they get very specific on thoroughfares and minor thoroughfares and boulevards and all these. To me it's a big road, and but there is distinct language that there is, and you probably they're shown in more detail in the small area plan, but still in your town's approved thoroughfare plan, it uses those same terms.
Okay. And so indeed, do the words thoroughfare and boulevard show up here?
They do on the thoroughfare plan. But I'm doing this by memory, but I've had the same questions about those words because to me it's just too many different nuances to the words. But they're all DOT level roadways that those larger words are referring to the larger roadways.
Okay, I'm looking at the May 17th draft, which I think is the one we're working on.
May 17th of what?
May 17th red line edition.
Of the elements. Yeah, and what we tried to pull, again, if you go back to the master plan, I think the same language is in the thoroughfare portion of that. And it's also, it intends to be consistent through the master plan, the elements, and the small area plan in that language.
Okay.
But if you ask me the difference between a thoroughfare and a boulevard, couldn't tell you.
Okay. And so why would the exemption list both public and private streets and private driveways?
I don't understand your question.
Section 7 exemptions.
Right. I mean, I know where we are, but what's your? Why does it include public and private streets and private driveways?
Why would it exempt that?
Because no plan. I don't think you've ever considered any plan that looks at private driveways and the lighting of those on someone's lot.
I get that, but why public and
private
streets?
Public streets, they're your streets, so they're exempt because you get to make the call on what they are. And we don't contemplate many private streets, and if you want to, we just put them in the same category as public streets. You get to make the call on what those standards are for those streets. This is not to say we're not trying to, this is to say you'll get a plan, you get to approve that, and we'll follow your desires.
It just seems like the language is trying to exempt everything.
Well, I don't, when you say everything.
What would not be exempt?
Any site that gets submitted with a site plan. So that's every mixed-use site, every non-residential site, every townhome site, every apartment site. It's really talking about single-family lots in number one, and then the way people hang a light off the side of their house in number one. We talk about how, in number two, we talk about the signage element is what specifically addresses lighting related to signs. So that's why it's exempt in this ordinance. It's not exempt from your scrutiny. It's just that it's in a different place.
So are there any streetlights regulated by this lighting element?
No, I would say no. Again, Duke does those. They're your streets. We build streets, so we have to install these things, but at the same time, we don't own those. This is standard in every municipality in the state.
And it's very surprising to me. I had a very different impression of how we were proceeding from the master plan through to the additional elements, through to the subdivision stage approvals, and then site plans. I thought at some point there would be some pavement with some street lighting that was going to be guided by
in the parking lots, the drive aisles and parking lots.
Drive aisles and parking lots.
And site plans. Those are all situations that are dealt with site plans.
Okay. All right.
And let me back up a second. When I said I don't know every municipality, and typically municipalities deal with it that way. But I should not say I know that every municipality does it that way.
There's enough exceptions about everything that we're trying to do here that I'm not terribly concerned about such comparisons. But we're trying to be exceptional.
I agree with you. I think we already are.
Why was the prohibition on flashing, rotating, etc. deleted from Section F?
Section
ground-mounted fixtures and accent lighting, Section F.
Sections are numbers, so I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Subsection F.
F in which section?
Probably. Yes.
That is in this latest version 5G.
Oh, 5G.
Yeah.
Thank you. Section 5, subsection G.
Okay, so what's the question?
So, in a previous draft, we had a prohibition on lights that flash and move and revolve and rotate and scintillate and blink and flicker and vary in intensity, and all of those words are almost offensive. So I thought it was a very good thing for us to prohibit.
I thought we were asked to remove, now again, I may be wrong here, but not your comments, but the comments from other earlier comments, I thought we were asked to remove that language. Is that, maybe I'm not going to say I'm right about that. But I can tell you, we don't particularly want flashing, scintillating, blinking.
I definitely don't want
So I don't.
Okay, can we restore that, please?
I'm not going to say absolutely yes to that because I want to understand the context of.
Sure, the history there. Well, there's still a prohibition on flashing or intermittent lights in the signage elements, which we'll get to.
That may be why there's a little.
But it's greatly stripped down.
If you have suggested language on that.
Your prior language. So that was one of those cases where there was deletion that wasn't highlighted.
Look, I'll say this. The way I would have preferred to do this is we accumulate comments and make one revision. There's so many revisions floating out there that I think it's confusing to me. So I'll walk up here with the latest, and if we did something 2 revisions ago, it's difficult to keep. So I apologize for that.
I apologize for my late delivery, Chuck, but
no, you're entitled to deliver anytime you want to. I respect that right.
Okay. On page 14, section K, illuminated tubing for strings of lights. Subsection K.
Yeah, I got it.
So this was originally prohibited, but why is it? Why was it prohibited?
There was a portion of it. I think what was asked to be removed was when it outlined edges of buildings. And so in this case, you see the trees and landscaping have not been removed from that. It was the comment that we got had to do with outlining edges of roofs or buildings, and that was removed.
Because you already have one that's outlined in a roof.
Well, that's not. I wouldn't say that's because of that.
But it does protect that kind.
That would be an example that would go through your review with the adoption of the element.
But in this case, it's specifically mentioned as or stands out as being allowed. So strings of lights and tubing, but again, the language of outlining roofs and buildings is appreciate that. And I do recall that conversation. Maybe it was an additional elements review committee meeting. Yeah. I think there might be some concern that if it went a little overboard, that it might actually create more of the glow that we're trying to control and mitigate with dark skies protection. Okay. I'm going to skip over some things, Chuck, because it sounds like there's some things that we can work on. Let's go to my last one.
What do you mean? You've got other comments you're not going to bring up?
Right. Yeah. I'll do this in writing.
Okay.
There's it seems like there's conflicts between the exemption for sign illumination. I've mentioned this before. The International Dark Skies Alliance, the organization that we're relying upon for some inspiration with these elements of your element that work to protect the dark sky. They really cautioned against the possibility that signage lighting can be a loophole through which illumination is delivered by a property owner of a building. And I think this is worth some small effort in the signage element to simply give deference, but reflect back to the principles that you've embodied in the lighting element that are setting forth the goal of protecting the dark sky.
So can I read the language from the signage element that refers to that? It's Section 8, 2B. Shielding of lights. External lighting directed toward a sign shall be shielded so that it illuminates only the face of the sign and does not shine directly into or cause glare onto a public right-of-way or residential premises. If it's outside of being on the sign, then it's in violation. So that's not on the sign. And it's got a shield on it. That's why it's under shielding of lights. If it's pointing up into the sky, it's not on the sign.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Jones, are you hearing that discussion just a little bit?
Sure.
So, my reading of that element, that particular part of this, the sign illumination section of that signage element, doesn't feel like it's sufficiently protected and sufficiently respectful of the very important principles that are over here in the lighting element. But if you were to encounter somebody who just put a giant mercury vapor lamp on a sign,
it's not allowed.
Okay, that one's not allowed. Let's say it's a super bright LED and it's properly shielded on all sides except up. In what way would it be brought to your attention?
How is it not shielded up? If it pointed
Let's
directly
say it's
to
an
the
uplit light fixture, an upcast.
I think the language is saying that it would be shielded so it would not go off property.
So you feel comfortable with that language that's going to...
Is there alternate language that would make you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that section could simply reflect...
That's how I would interpret it. I'm the one who would be enforcing the ordinances.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you that's how I would interpret it.
All right.
If there's a need for something else...
You feel good and strong on that, then that's great.
You can always offer alternative language so they can consider.
I understand.
Well, there's no mandate in there that it be directed toward a sign, and I think that's what you're worried about. You're worried about something that is just errantly going into space.
Sure.
And so why don't you propose language that would mandate that the light, whatever it is, has to be directed toward the sign?
Well, isn't it says external lighting directed to the sign? Same thing. External lighting that's not directed at a sign may do otherwise. Would not be required to illuminate the sign.
How about saying external lighting must be directed toward the sign and shall be shielded so it eliminates only the face of the sign and not cause glare in the public right of way?
Well,
For residential premises.
I'll deliver this in writing, but if Mr. Jones feels confident with this,
Mr. Jones is not the only person that's going to enforce it. I mean, I'm very enthusiastic about Mr. Jones' employment here, but I think that there's going to come a time when he's not here, and it needs to be...
Perhaps in 30 or 40 years. So maybe we could just, I think I have some language here. Please can we make reference in the signage element that sign illumination should not violate the purposes of the lighting element? Because the purposes are very clearly stated and admirably crafted.
I'm part of that.
So, and I don't want to put you on the spot to demand an answer right now. If you'd like to consider that.
Well, I would say put me on the spot if we're going to vote on it tonight. I mean, if we're going to keep doing this there's no end to this.
Well, I think there is. I think we want to.
Okay, put me on the spot. What do you want me to do?
Please make reference in the signage element that sign illumination should not violate...
So just to make sure I'm covering... I don't know how much clearer it can be when it says it illuminates only the face of the... That is pretty restrictive. Only the face of the sign. 1/8 of an inch off the face of the sign, light trespasses. You get to say, fix it. And so, I don't... I can add these other It's the, the purpose statement in lighting says reduce adverse off-site impacts of lighting such as light trespassing, obtrusive light. I think that's the one that refers to that. And I don't, when it's shielded and says it's only on the face of the sign, I don't know how to do better than that.
You're thinking that all the other in the lighting element is saying that all the lights are shining down.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. And in this instance, we're getting a light that's shining something other than straight down, but horizontal with the ground.
Be horizontal with the outlet.
The ground and the ground shining up.
Shining up the sun.
I requested Oakland that signs be done, and that was rejected. So I'm moving on and requesting that some moderate language be placed inside there to give reference to the protective principles of the lighting element.
If you want a statement in here that refers to within a statement in the signage element that refers to the purpose statement of the lighting element, I think we can do that.
That's exactly what I'm asking for.
Well, I'm reading it as you talk to somebody other than me, so.
All right. Great. Okay, so that's lighting on. Let's move on to signage. As I understand it, off-premise signage is still prohibited. Is that correct?
That's not the way I understand it.
I have seen off-premise temporary signage, but I did not see a category of permittable.
I think what it does is give instances that it is absolutely not allowed, and then every other instance would have to be part of a sign plan that comes to you for approval.
Okay. So as I try to respond to constituents and business owners who say they really want an off-premise sign policy here in town, and we try and work that through our UDO, then it's possible that we might have an explicit agreement on a set of aesthetically designed signs that are kind of a program, an off-site or off-premise signage program that Chatham Park might consider embracing for your own properties and areas?
And as a blanket statement, I would say yes. Most of my experiences with dealing with off-premise signs is, the business community, wants to put up mattress signs down the street and everything. That's usually the issue. It's not. There are absolutely valid situations, and the ones the ones I've dealt with most specifically are when there's been apartment projects, for example, off of the main roadway, and nobody knows they're back there, and so. And it has to come to the town to meet aesthetic requirements, material requirements, color requirements, your sign size, all those things. So I don't know, but still, you could have a majority of the board that feels very strongly that mattress signs should be allowed to run down the street. And we don't want to. We're not trying to do that. So I don't want to say absolutely yes, but I think we'd agree in spirit with what you're.
Okay. All right. Icon signage. So proposed icon signs, on page 14, proposed icon signs shall be approved or disapproved without regard to their copy. And I guess, Chuck, this isn't so much a question for you, but as a question for our town attorney, Mr. Messick. this gets into the Supreme Court decision and with regards to non-commercial content. But is it not still true that local governments can regulate commercial sign content?
In what respect, regulate?
Well, in this case, it says that proposed icon signs shall be approved or disapproved without regard to their copy. And I just...
I'm not sure that you can regulate copy.
But can we approve or disapprove with regard to copy?
No, I don't.
For a commercial sign.
I don't know that you have any right to regulate copy. I'm not sure what an icon sign is in the first place, but
if we want to have flashing, scintillating, blinking lights on Chatham Park logo, that's a icon sign.
And if you want oscillating, that might be different.
Yeah, I'm kidding. We won't do that kind of iconic sign. Mr. Eagle could probably, I mean, we've had a lot of conversation with our attorney representing us, who's been in the middle of this whole Supreme Court issue with other municipalities, and that's what we've gotten very specific about that language because of that. So I mean, that's purely what that's based on, his recommendations of what is legal and illegal. Is that fair, Mr. Eagle? And you can just say yes or no.
Yeah, Ken.
Well, I'll come up here where they can hear me.
Ken Eagle, Chatham Park. We've relied on an attorney in Charlotte, with Parker Poe, the firm of Parker Poe, who is very closely involved with helping to write sign ordinances for municipalities, particularly since the most recent Supreme Court decision. I'd have to go back and find that decision and read it to find language in there for you, but he went through our sign element and rewrote the parts that he felt like needed to be rewritten to comply with the recent court decisions. Now, for me to tell you that, or me to try to answer Mr. Bonds' question, I can't do that because I'm not that expert. That's why we employed a more expert attorney at it than I am to give us that advice. And that's, as I said, he went through and rewrote the sign ordinance for us, or the sign element for us. We worked with him, but he took the lead on the parts that he felt like might violate the current court decisions. And so that's the only answer really I can give you tonight.
Well, the reason that the question occurred to me is that it seemed like it was a fairly broad statement about proposed icon signs, and seemed like an overstatement of the town's ability to approve or disapprove signage. And I can imagine, maybe I can't imagine, as far as I know, what the language might be that might be deemed offensive or not approvable, but I'm trying to be cautious and conservative and mindful that times can change, and maybe town would want to reserve the right to approve or disapprove a sign with regard to the copy on the sign. Any sense from my fellow board members about that very vague and perhaps academic question?
It's a matter of some sort of trademark or copyright on an icon sign that could not be changed because it is so significant that it identifies Chatham Park in a particular way.
I guess that might be an applicant's concern, but I think that this ordinance is not specifically for Chatham Park. It's for their assignees, for their property owners, for their customers. That's my understanding of the icon signage
Well,
section. And
it says that it's a community identity or image for Chatham Park. So, I mean, it's intended to be just for Chatham Park, not McDonald's. And it's really not a subdivision interest either. It might be, over 7,000 acres. Well, in many ways, it could be like the printing of Chatham Parkway on the bridge. I mean, that's more of an iconic, and we're thinking that we will have a couple different locations as you enter into the project from off-site, like possibly down 15501, that there is a special signage treatment that you get to approve, but that in this setting, you would approve it without regard to copy.
Chuck, do you know where you're defining icon sign?
This Q, it was on the red edited, or is page 28 crossed out?
I was looking for it.
It's in section 4Q.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, if you had a sign on the water tank, is that considered?
I would consider that, but we've stayed away from. We don't want anything to do with that.
Okay, because I thought we might not have to say about that.
No, that's why we've avoided it, because you do have say. There's no way we're going to. We will figure that out together.
I thought you all engaging with me doing.
No, there are just some things that you should walk away from with your arm.
Is there further curiosity about this particular one?
Yeah, I mean, it does have to, that whole thing about not having to say something iconic sounds like really major and not having to be more to it.
Would it help to define iconic signs in the definition section 10? Yes.
Commissioner Fiocco identified it.
Or if you're saying you would like a definition in the... But Ms. Foley, that is absolutely, you can go stand before the Supreme Court and fight for that right. But I'm gonna use the same language that's in Q.
It creates a sense of arrival or permanent community identification.
Right. I mean, that first sentence is the definition that I will insert. So you don't have to wonder what it'll say.
I think it's like the word that kind of sounds like it could be quite flashy, so not saying you all would necessarily do that, but it's just like that would be the one person.
You still get to approve it.
I know, that's the same, the wording to me is not.
Well, let's move on. Sorry. It sounds like we're going to get a definition out of it, and
You already have it.
great. All right. Better be added to definitions. Page 17, home occupation signs. It's something that we have in a very few locations here in town, where home businesses are advertised out in front with a discrete sign. And the puzzling thing about this was that I'm curious how many lot frontages will have a minimum of 300 feet of linear road frontage. How many residential lots will have that?
I would say if you forced me to put a number on it,
Yes.
I would say 0.
Yeah. Okay, so why is it?
But
Is
that
a
doesn't.
typo maybe? Should it be 30 feet?
Oh no.
Minimum of 30 feet?
No, we're trying to be restrictive on this. We're not. In Chatham Park, we are. That doesn't mean.
Home occupation. Okay, so one would have to buy a very, very large lot in order to have a
If
home
you feel
business.
strongly about your
Okay,
sign,
fair
your
enough.
home
That's
occupation,
all right.
or you can come. I don't know if it says anything about off premises. If that's. But,
Touche. All right. Temporary future use signs is something that I have heard some complaints about, Mr. Smith. Sorry, but I'm guessing that people in this community don't want to see a coming in future sign up for up to 6 years. And we have a clause in there right now that allows for 2 renewals up to 24 months each. And so we could have a temporary sign for a future use that stays up for 6 years. And I would propose that we change that. Just find and replace 24 for 12 months.
And I'll tell you the specific reason we included this language in here. Again, it's not for your normal run-of-the-mill businesses. It's for the hospital. And people are interested in knowing, when that is settled, and knowing that that's coming in within in a certain amount of time. So we didn't want to. We wanted that to be out there.
For 6 years.
As soon as we know it's within 6 years, that's what we would want to do, just so people can feel assured with that. We wouldn't do it.
Okay, well, if we allow for the hospital, we're allowing it for any other future use. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that. We could have a temporary sign up for 6 years.
Where is it on this?
Where is that? I hadn't.
Page 20.
Yeah.
Future uses, and what you talking about in section 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily done the math to look at the 6 years, but it's, the language that I'm, it's talking about 12 months, and when you get into situations where construction takes longer than 12 months, you can extend that.
I'm sure there's business cases where it can happen, and it has happened, but so the business that I was affiliated with, Chatham Marketplace Grocery, got into a really rough situation where the property owner had promised to build a monument sign. They didn't, and we ended up having a temporary sign for, I think, 3 years. And in negotiation with the town planner at that time, what we did was we simply replaced that sign. But I don't see how this language would facilitate that kind of transaction. It seems to me, I'm just trying to think conservatively, Chuck, here, that we could have an old beat-up sign that's 6 years old.
I'm not saying you're wrong. You point me to the language that talks about 6 years.
Temporary.
Yeah, I'm on section 5. Section 5.
Just a second. Let me.
I'm sorry.
6 is not mentioned. What's mentioned is 24 with 2 renewals.
And what's the permit that's issued? Site plan approval?
No.
Would it
So it'd be a sign.
building permit?
No, it'd be a sign permit.
Sign permit comes to you.
Temporary sign permit.
You can deny but obviously if the language in here allows it, then.
Well, it says 24 months from the date of issuance of the permit for the project's development. I don't think that's a sign permit. I think that's a site permit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's right. Yeah. And so I would think that the sign would expire upon the expiration of the entitlement and/or the project would be under construction.
So then we don't need
Oh, I see where you are. I'm
2
sorry.
permit renewals.
Unless they wanted to sign up while they're under construction.
For 6 years.
I think about
I think we can. I think we can. I think we can ask for modification. So,
Because this is tied to the approval of the project.
Of the site plan.
Right, yeah, once they're open, no longer have a temporary sign. It's fine for now.
well, again, I'll suggest that we change 24 paren 24 to 12 months paren 12 with the same 2 permit renewals. So that'd be a limit of 3 years. I think it's a simple request.
Reasonable, in so much as a lot of these buildings are going to be put up very quickly, even the hospital, which complex as that is. And that ought to be every 3 years.
Well, I think, yeah, because I agree with that. And I think your site plan, the approval of your site plan, for example, if you sat there and didn't act on just beginning construction, that has a life cycle too. There is
If the sign is up for 6 years, it loses its effectiveness anyway, and
Yeah.
they're still a pretty small town, word gets out.
boy crying wolf. Yeah, I don't think that you would ever, because it's that number is tied to the site and construction of the. That'd be an interesting project that took that long to build.
It'd be a very unusual chain of events that would lead to that. So let's see if we can do to moderate that.
Yeah, we're good with that. So.
Great, thank you. I think I can't remember from my notes whether this page 20 of the PDF or page 20 page markers. A couple of typographical errors or editing remnants. One is a bracketed parenthetical phrase. The time periods here are just jumping off points for discussion. The amount of time that these signs will be displayed is a policy issue more than a legal one. Let's just strike that.
We removed that from the most recent.
It was removed?
Yes.
Oh, very good.
I think there were 2 instances that we removed.
All right. Apologies for my
That was
confusion.
in the same copy that we.
And
that was a test.
And the distance between series signs?
Yeah, that was in the
That was
same.
fixed, too.
It was right to 100 feet.
Okay.
At Mr. Messick's suggestion.
All right. Very good. So, if I may, I'll circle back to something I laid some groundwork on, and that is the whole issue of controls and lighting. My concerns are recontextualized with what I've learned tonight, Chuck, about apparently how little street lighting you'll have, but it still remains a concern. I guess if to the extent that parking lot lighting continues to burn in a town that has expressed concern about dark skies protection, and in a community, Chatham Park, which has such an admirable and carefully worded lighting set of principles on protecting dark skies. Why do we need to limit ourselves to photoelectric controls?
Well, I think the real issue that we were limiting ourselves to was this phrase, as the technology becomes reasonably and locally available. That's more with Duke.
Great qualifier.
And that's with Duke.
And that works perfectly.
Yeah, no, look, we are not, I don't know if you think that we're, kicking and spitting, trying not to do this. I mean, we're part of the Clean Tech Cluster.
I get it. So
yes,
it just puzzles me why you're not.
We're not making it a requirement because today it is not reasonably and locally available with Duke.
But it is reasonably and locally available in the private sector.
But we use Duke.
but you don't have to use Duke
Well,
for parking lots.
we're probably using Duke, and if it was something that Duke felt comfortable with, and again, this gets back to safety and other issues. If they felt comfortable with it, I mean, he said they're trying to get Duke to adopt this, so there's some reason that Duke has not done that yet. And
Well,
so,
they-
as soon as they do, then all of a sudden, it's part of the toolbox you're choosing from, and we're there.
Duke also didn't put LED streetlights on a tariff, in other words, put it on the shelf for us to buy, until the League of Municipalities in 2013 worked so hard through the Utilities Commission to get them to add it. And at that, they added it at an overpriced tariff. And I've heard that from people at the Utilities Commission, I've heard that from people inside Duke Energy, that it's an overpriced tariff. So,
Well, I can't comment on that, but
well, I understand.
I do think we need language in there that allows us to make the switch. I mean, I was impressed by the company that came to the website, and there's a lot of technology that's going to be changing in the next 20 or 30 years. It seems reasonable to include language that says the switch could be made, because it seems to me parking lots actually probably produce more light than street lights.
yeah, I don't disagree with that. But you know, he said that they deal with utility companies and the municipality. They don't deal with private.
But is this another instance where we could talk further about the implementation of it as the technology emerges in this?
Oh, that's what we've said in the language of the element. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that.
Sure, I will disagree. You don't say that. What you say is subject to necessary technology being reasonably and locally available.
That's what we say.
The only control you mention is photoelectric switches.
We can expand on photoelectric. That's why I said at the beginning of this that we were focusing on the first part of that sentence, not the photoelectric. But we can add.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
So because you've got the caveats here.
I'm sorry, say that.
I read those as caveats or qualifiers. Reasonably and locally available. In other words, if it's not reasonable and if it's not local, you don't have to implement
I think that's probably what you would choose to do with the town. If it's not reasonable, you're not going to do it. I mean, I don't think
I
it's.
just don't understand why the resistance to including the word controls. You've already got the qualifiers.
No, I just said I don't have a problem with expanding photoelectric switches to include other devices that are out there.
Marvelous. Thank you.
But reasonably and locally available is still what we're.
That's all I was asking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, there's technology with solar panels on parking lots. There's all kinds of exciting things happening.
Very good.
So would it be possible to have these edits that we've discussed tonight available so that we can vote on the 24th?
As I understand it, we've only got 3 or 4, so we could have them to you tomorrow. But so yes, it's. And if there's specific language, we could probably come back to you in 10 minutes and give it to you while you do other things.
I think so. That's reasonable.
In a few minutes.
I've written down at least the comments I'm
Appreciate
supposed
it.
to
Write it
respond
down.
to.
I'd like to see it and reread it carefully and not feel rushed.
I'll say, Mr. Bonnets, we've been doing this for a long time, and with that proposal, there's never an end to it. You could come back next week. I really would like to read it one more time. And I respect your right to do that, but there's a point where we're within 3 sentences or so of that's as far as we're going, and you get to vote.
So how about tomorrow? Would that be something that would give you? Would you be able to? Would the be able to read it tomorrow?
How would we proceed with the vote tomorrow?
Yeah, you won't vote until 2 weeks, but that's your right.
Chuck, I want to get this right. I don't have any intention of dragging it out indefinitely.
I'll accept you at your word on that because it sure seems like that's the way it's been.
Oh, I'm sorry that it seems like that. It feels like I've made reasonable requests, they've been rejected outright.
Some have because we can't agree to it.
Just agree to the lighting controls. Thank you.
Yeah, some we have and some we haven't. I mean, we haven't. I mean, it's.
The red lights here.
the earlier you can get there to it, the better it would be. And then,
You'll have plenty of time to review the revisions. And you, so you want me to just be clear about, because I'm getting more, we talked, you want a new copy with just the changes we're talking about tonight, outlined in red.
I agree.
Okay.
Make that a clean copy, too.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
And
pardon?
a
A
clean
clean
copy.
copy.
Oh, sure, yeah, right.
So that we're ready
So
and
you
able.
understand the final language, and
Yes, sir.
there's no confusion about what that language is. Yes.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and if in the meantime anybody came up with anything further, I think we've seen tonight that it would be great to be able to get that out and distributed as quickly as possible. But that otherwise we intend to work towards revising and improving signage and lighting.
Thank you.
Just before Chuck leaves, John, is it your intention, do you want to see all your comments addressed that you gave to us tonight? In writing?
I would.
So that's different than what we just left with. So we need to be clear as to what you want Chatham Park to do.
Okay. All right.
Do you understand that?
So,
before you
I understand there's a distinction because he said, there were some things he said I'm not ready to give you yet.
Right.
I want to give them to you in writing, and so there is some confusion on that.
Right. So there may be additional back and forth that has to go back because we haven't discussed those comments tonight, and we're waiting till next week.
Which means
another delay.
No.
If there's comments.
I'll be ready to vote next meeting.
Okay.
So, John, did you say you had additional comments you're going to put in writing tomorrow?
I've already put them in writing.
But they
Yeah,
can't
you
be
can present
presented,
those, Chuck.
can they not be presented right now so that we are all get the benefit of what
You
those
have
comments are?
Or for the public.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have them electronically.
Oh.
Yeah.
But those are the same questions you just gone over, right?
Yes, with the exception of one that was very detailed. I didn't want to belabor that here and now. So.
Let's belabor it.
Okay. All right. So it goes back to the special purpose lighting in the lighting ordinance.
Can you point me to a specific place? So I'm with you.
Yep.
Section 6.
Page 14.
And this is where you talked to Jeff Earl about administrative alternatives about
Yes,
planning director.
yes. So, well, just to begin with, we don't have petrochemical facilities allowed in our listed uses, I believe, petrochemical manufacturing. I don't remember ever seeing it.
Yeah, we probably don't have shipping piers either.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, is petrochemical possible? I think it's within the realm of possibility.
I don't think it was in the master plan.
If you're saying it's not an allowed use, and it's not in the master plan, any use that's not allowed in the master plan will have to come back before you for that consideration.
Okay, so.
And in this case, this is not trying to allow petrochemical use sites. What it's talking about is lighting for industrial sites such as that. So it's more of those an industrial site that's got special requirements that you can't contemplate right now exactly what that requirement would be. So that's why it's put into the special purpose category. So it's not allowing those things; it's just giving those as examples.
So, given that it is a specialized industrial use, that would then require the approval of planning board and town board as part of site plan. Is that right? Is that your understanding?
Say that again, make sure I heard that right.
Given that it's not...
You're not talking about petrochemical manufacturing site.
Yeah.
Well, that would
It's a
get
specialized industrial
any industrial site with special requirements that's not allowed under the allowed uses in the master plan would have to come to you as a rezoning. But the fact that an industrial site that's allowed by use that has that's something that's considered to be special lighting requirements, that wouldn't be a rezoning. The use is already allowed, so then you're just contemplating what the lighting is for that.
Well, that one, like number one, also confused me. Sports facilities, including but not limited to unconditioned rinks of the course, fields, stadiums. That being an item of special purpose that should be approved by the administrative, rather by the planning director. But yet sports facilities are covered elsewhere if you're in this.
Yeah, down below it says they'll meet certain standards. They have to meet certain standards before he can then take it and approve any nuance administratively.
That makes sense. Construction lighting. That seems like another area where we, and understandably, y'all probably would not want to create offense with excessive construction lighting. But I think maybe it should have its own section, or have some guidance that.
But you're giving those descriptives to the planning director for him to make that decision. So, at least for me, I mean, I can certainly think of some situations like repairs and the bridge in Atlanta burns down. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
We need them working all night.
Exactly. And so, but then just because we want to be able to work all night building the McDonald's, I don't think that passes that test for Mr. Jones. The other example that I've seen fairly, there's some sort of deadline on, having an opening tomorrow, and we've had landscape contractors working all night to get the landscape in to meet requirements. So I mean, it's unusual situations.
I've done that. Not landscaping, but worked all night and
you get it.
Lighting. Well, but in the sports facilities, I guess the point is that the sports facilities have guidance elsewhere. Why wouldn't we have construction lighting have similar guidance?
The only thing I can say to that is that in the construction, in the sports lighting, it's an accepted standard of when you're providing those particular specifications on how you light those facilities. And the construction lighting is a very unusual situation. And so I think it would vary greatly depending on the situation of construction too. And I don't know how you would give those standards, but you have to give that information to Mr. Jones before he can allow that.
Well, it might be helpful just to urge that be downward directed, and perhaps similar attention to.
And so, if it was just at least a number of these situations, if they're exempt, like roadway lighting would be exempt. So, if you were repairing the road, there were town roads that you had to repair the bridge that burned down. You're going to put standards on the construction company to downlight all that, those kind of situations.
Well, I think that's a worst case scenario.
Well, but this is what this has to consider, and that's why I think you give that Jones to Mr. Information, and he makes those calls. And I imagine if it's something that's really unusual like that, he's probably going to talk to you guys some. I can't speak for him, but.
Any parking structures? That seems like something we ought to be able to deal with. Fairly straightforward, not have it go through well, I'll say it, a subjective process.
You guys want to strike parking structures from the administrative alternative?
We're going to have to. You're not going to have to talk about it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's an open question. So, ornamental and architectural lighting.
And I think this is contemplated. This has been covered in a few places in the element. So I think it's kind of a catch-all for situations that were contemplated in those specific scenarios that were laid out in the element, and leaving that up to them.
You want to leave it to the planning director.
Right.
Well, that's fair enough. I'll admit my last puzzle here is, well, maybe two of them actually. Correctional facilities, I don't think those are permitted. Mr. Jones, are you aware of whether or not correctional facilities are permitted?
If that's not allowed use, we'll strike that from the language.
Okay. And theme and amusement parks. I almost laugh about this one because I just don't recall seeing it in the master plan. But
I think it's probably under commercial recreation or something like that.
I say I'm amused because there's a debate up in Saxball right now. That I'm almost jealous we don't have opportunity to have that debate down there.
We have no zoning there.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
So if it did come here, you would like that?
I would be very interested in entertaining that concept. I mean, we're an amusing community, aren't we?
Park here.
What's that?
We have a theme park here. Amusement too.
Lots of amusement. All right. Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so what we're talking
We'll have
about
to get
then
into
is
this one.
incorporating these things into the next draft. We'll get a red line, a final version, ASAP, and we'll be ready to go. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We are with Brian Grusbeck and Heather Meacham on the proposed budget. I had the pleasure of spending some time with them today and getting answers to some fairly nitpicky questions I have that if the board would start with their questions, and we can, obviously we're in a situation where we need to be
Possibly taking a 5-minute break.
sure.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Okay.
I second that.
I'll need a motion by Joe Carroll, second by John Dodd. Those in favor, please indicate by standing and moving. Get back to the session. Moved by Pamela Bowles, seconded by Michael Keough. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Great. Unanimous decision to go back. Brian Grusbeck has just had an amazing thought. May we turn it?
Once we do that.
Yeah.
We're going to make a proclamation this day.
I don't have to do it again. I'm suggesting that we look to a special meeting, at your pleasure, for possibly either the 19th or the 20th, to go into detail on this budget. In the meantime, certainly you can send me some questions, comments that you have. You can compile all those, but I'd like to give this a little bit more time and mental energy than what we're going to have tonight. We do have some time-sensitive stuff that we need to get to later on in the meeting, so obviously not anticipating a very good conversation discussion we had earlier on with the additional elements, so I want to give this proper due before we get too far into it. The board's pleasure, and I would recommend considering a special meeting in the next week. So,
And you recommended the 19th for the coffee?
but that was yeah. If you guys want to do it sooner than that, we can work on something sooner.
I can do both those days. Monday and Tuesday. Monday the 19th.
I prefer to do Monday. I think I'm going to the grandchild high school graduation in mid-week, so.
Okay.
6 o'clock? Okay.
Do we want to stick a toe in at all, or just defer entirely?
What do you think? Monday?
I'd like to just make one or two more suggestions that Brian could maybe trash over real quick.
Okay.
I know that we, I spoke to several commissioners regarding it. I didn't see it in the budget or anything, but during our work sessions, you know, we really stress hard a utilities engineer. What you need to do for myself and the board is really put some strong numbers together for a possible position for that. I know we made several recommendations in our work sessions, had some thoughts with some other commissioners, and I think that's a top priority as far as I'm concerned in our budget this year.
Okay. We'll also offer some suggestions maybe for raising revenue to accommodate those.
Or decreases in budget items.
Maybe scenarios, a couple scenarios, maybe.
That's in addition to the $30,000 that we've budgeted for additional engineering. So we've got $30,000 additional in there to have to hire for additional engineering help to assist with expected plan review and things of that nature. What we're talking about is probably adding on top of that, or in lieu of that, a minimum of $70,000 to $100,000 for an additional position.
30 in contract services.
That's reflected. I provided some highlights in front of you. We've cut, and this is what the mayor and I were talking about earlier today, we've cut about what we can cut. I can provide you with some options for some additional cuts. But I think at this point in time, you're looking to have to probably raise revenue to closer to balancing the budget. And that's something you're well within your ability to do, but that's the option that you're probably looking at from the most realistic perspective. I think I want to caution you because I think dipping your toe in at this point in time, probably there's an arm that's going to reach up and grab you down into additional conversations.
Yeah. Jay, do you have another thing you want to mention, or I thought you said you had a couple things, but
No, that's really the main thing right there.
thank you.
Are there any other?
Probably did, but
Are there any other items like that that we need to flesh forward so that when prepare alternatives, or is that basically where we?
And in the meantime, feel free to stop by and, give me a holler or whatever you want to do. We'll get we
It
noticed
may take a
that.
while to hire somebody, but that might also cost a little bit.
And one of the things we talked about today was that you don't want somebody for this position that this is their first position. I mean, we need somebody with some depth of experience, somebody that, I said, wasn't wet behind the ears, and Brian said maybe just about the middle. So, I think that, you know, of course, the more experience they have, the greater the salary is. Okay,
Somebody might be looking to retire in Pittsburgh.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
So do we need a motion to have a special meeting on the 19th at 6 o'clock on the budget in lieu of old business item number 2? So we have that.
So moved.
Motion made by John Bonnet, seconded by Beth Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Manager's update.
Didn't include it in your packet. This is everything I've been working on for the last couple of weeks. If I haven't gotten to whatever it is you're interested in, trust me, I'll get to it soon.
Well, as this piece of miscellanea, I would like to thank, and I did today, we have new sidewalk outside. And for those of us who are either on walkers or canes, it's just lovely to come up this afternoon and see brand new concrete laid out there. Small things, oftentimes. So, Commissioner concerns. Why don't we start on this end? John Bonnet? Or should I switch over?
No, that's good. I just need to read through because I think we've discussed some of these. Big thank you to Commissioner Fiocco and Commissioner Baldwin for your reports on Triangle J and Tyler Mulligan. Very, very much looking forward to that. I would ask if there's any way that we might have that meeting in town with Mr. Mulligan. Your holidays, daytimes, I haven't approved sufficiently to take days off with this new job. I mean, we have this space we can be in. There's a need for a space. Very, very eager to hear about that. Affordable housing is something I really want.
Right, they want to do an informal meeting to start the conversation.
So we'd have to minor quorum.
Right.
As well. And Mr. Rusbeck, do I remember early in the meeting when we heard something about we might hear a report on the status of the rain garden, the courthouse circle, stormwater project?
And I think this was talked about at a previous meeting. The staff had put the project out for bids once previous, received 2 bids. State asked us to go back and put it out for bids again. We didn't receive any bids. So now staff has circled back with, I guess, what it feels to be the most responsible bidder apparently, and is trying to negotiate a price that we haven't met on the price yet. That's where it's standing right now. Not good news, but not bad news yet either.
So the state in part pushed us on our deadline.
Yeah, and I forget what exactly, by what force, but.
Okay, thank you.
What is our deadline? Is one of the questions I have. Yeah.
Did you include that in your July 26th or June 26th? Thank you. What is the nature of the July 24 update on UDO? It's on the agenda or forward-looking agenda.
Yeah, I think that's coming back with Roger Walden and Jeff Jones.
Okay.
just providing what they have right now on module 3.
I think I remember hearing that there have been regular recurring meetings between town and Chatham Park and Wooten with the state regarding our sewer plans. Is that right?
We schedule monthly meetings. They're kind of, the last meeting wasn't scheduled, or last meeting was scheduled but not held because we're kind of in a holding pattern with some of these agreements. They want to see LGC. LGC would like to see, LGC and now DWI would like to see agreements that we have with Chatham Park for guarantee of financing, as well as the MOU for the letter of intent, I guess it's called. So essentially, any items that we have, any agreements that we have that would guarantee the financial component of the project, they want to see. There's been some follow-up between DWI and Wooten as far as some questions on the ER and the project, and they've been in process with that.
But does that affect the renewal of our NPDES?
No.
What is the status of that?
It's with the state. They don't have it completed. It's just sitting on a desk there.
So we're just waiting for them.
Yeah.
Is it a personnel issue, or they just don't have enough people to review?
No, I think it has something to do with the Jordan rules. Tim, you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe? Tim Bowl.
If you're aware.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure where the latest is between two of them, but my understanding is those rules were to go in effect in 2019. Our legislature pushed those rules back 2 years. Not happy about that. The EPA hasn't renewed permits in the Jordan Basin. They've been, I'm sure there's some infighting going on that we're not all privy to, but that's where it was hung up a year ago when that legislation went through. So, and then we've had turnover downtown. You did mention turnover. There are new folks in that group now. So there could be a combination of those things that are still delaying.
Okay. Thank you. Is it for me?
Oh, okay. Member Ball?
No.
Yes, sir.
I want the update on the rain gardens.
Yes, I just have one thing. A town resident contacted me about, I think he lives on 902, near Pittsburgh Primary School, in that area somewhere. Apparently the big truck comes barreling into town, and then they put their back brakes on, so they make this loud, no sound. Yeah, Jake Ray, that's what it was, Jake Ray. And he was wanting to know if that's something we want to consider putting in one of our ordinances, that they not be able to take breaks right there in the corner of people's homes. Because he said it's extremely loud and it's dirty sound, and that would not agree. Break the road and shut down before the business.
So,
I felt that way about Michael Field, and that they couldn't break the bridge over there, that they didn't break that.
I hear that the question about noise ordinance. That'd be part of the noise ordinance, and I've had a question about noise ordinance. So I'm going to put a placeholder in my notes about that. I wondered about the same thing. But
The city towns, they have a sign that says, no breaking.
I'm not sure if you heard that, Mr. Reese, that
That's why I had kind of wondered if we had something already. I'd seen ordinances in previous lives that prohibited it from the previous life of how it was supposed. Maybe we had some language already that did, but doesn't sound like we do. So I guess I would try to take a look at maybe how some other communities have handled it.
That'd be great.
Thank
you.
All right. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. Moved by Dr. Taylor, seconded by John Bonner. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. We're not ready group here.
Crowd's been down
Is this the end of the holdover?
Yeah, Tim's not
The board considered three things in closed session, and I'd entertain at this point motions now that we're back in regular session. Oh, do we need to be back in regular session? Or did we do that?
You did that. Motion to go back in regular session.
Michael Fiocco moved and Pamela Baldwin seconded that motion. Sorry. To go back into regular session. So those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. So we're back in regular session, having looked at three different things in closed session, and so we bring before the board at this point for a public vote. First of all, an agreement for purchase and sale. The board has considered. Is there a motion or further discussion on that agreement?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Motion made by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Pamela Baldwin. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. The second item that was presented in closed session was a lease inducement agreement. Yeah. We need to do that. We do that now? No? Okay. The lease inducement agreement, which we discussed. Is there further discussion on that?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Beth Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. There has been presented a ordinance establishing a capital project budget for town hall, which would appropriate funds from the fund balance, transfer to the town hall project, and have a contribution and land purchase. Is there an acceptance of this ordinance? A motion to approve this ordinance?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Michael Fiocco. Second. Seconded by Beth Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Does the board wish to act on the letter of intent tonight? It was the third document that was examined during the session.
I move that we place the letter of intent on the agenda for June 26th.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second to the motion? Second. Seconded by Beth Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Did I hear two? No. Three. The motion then fails.
I'll make a motion to approve the letter of intent.
Made by Michael Fiocco. Is there a second? Seconded by Pamela Baldwin. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Discussion?
Excuse me. Discussion? Yes.
We have just received the letter of intent tonight. I unsealed my packet as we went into closed session. I am...
You received the letter of intent with your packet when it was delivered.
Okay. I unsealed my packet as we started.
I can't help that, but you were delivered that packet on Thursday.
Thank you for the correction. I unsealed the packet as we went into closed session, and it's a 3-page legal document and a letter of intent that I take very seriously, and I'm looking forward to reading it in detail, and would appreciate the sensitivity of the board in supporting my desire to have confidence in our decision.
Is there any further discussion?
I might also suggest that this is an opportunity where we can work together rather than creating division on this board.
I don't think that it creates division. I think we have a learned attorney, and this attorney has actually completed this letter of intent, and I have confidence in domestic absolutely. So I don't think that creates division. I think you have the right to an opinion, and in my opinion, I'm really pleased with what he has given here, because this is similar to, this is what I had asked for, so it would not be binding, basically, in terms of the permit going to someone. So I have confidence in what the domestic has presented to me. But I do understand I do understand your opinion.
I also feel confident on Mr. Messick, but I also feel that if it just takes one more meeting before everyone's comfortable with it, I'm fine with Commissioner Bonnet bringing his extra time to read it. All I did was say I feel good about this. It's helpful hearing his opinion on it.
Anything further? Hearing none, then is the board ready to vote? If so, Michael Fiocco has made the motion, and Pamela Baldwin seconded, that we approve this letter of intent. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 3-2.
Makes me really sad, friends. Very simple request. A couple of weeks. And, yeah.
Is that the agenda, proposed to the agenda thing? Then we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mike Fiocco has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pamela Baldwin. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.